And it's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching. Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
A race against time as 5 people remain trapped 13,000 feet below the Atlantic Ocean.
Good morning to you. At 6 o'clock on Tuesday, the 20th of June. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster.
Wherever you're watching, wherever you're listening, thank you for your company and leading the news on this Tuesday morning.
We were notified by the operator of the submersible vessel that it was overdue, and it had 5 persons on board the submersible.
A mission to save a Titanic tourist sub continues this morning. One of the passengers on board includes British billionaire Hamish Harding. It's thought the sub has enough oxygen to last just until Thursday.
A ban for Boris. The former PM loses his parliamentary pass after MPs back the report that he deliberately misled Parliament over lockdown parties by 354 votes to 7.
More than 6 million disabled people will receive a £150 cost of living payment from today. The payments are intended to help the most vulnerable households as part of a wider £1,350 support package.
3 of the home nations competed in the Euros last night, with some more successful than others.
Yeah, it's true, Isabel. England scores 7, Wales lose to Turkey. I'm afraid, Mr. Holmes, that Northern Ireland have lost to Kazakhstan.
Where even is Kazakhstan? Where is that?
It's a very, very long way away. Long way away.
Yeah. Well, they won anyway in Belfast. And rain for many of you yesterday. Are we going to see a return of sunshine, though?
Another day of downpours for many of us today, but it turns drier, sunnier and warmer in the south later this week. How high will temperatures go? I'll have the forecast in a bit.
So to our top story this morning, the search is continuing for a submersible tourist vessel which was en route to the Titanic shipwreck in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean.
British billionaire Hamish Harding, chairman of private plane firm Action Aviation, is understood to be one of the 5 people on board OceanGate Expeditions, which was reported overdue on Sunday evening. That was about 435 miles south of Newfoundland.
Well, during a press conference, Rear Admiral John W. Morga of the US Coast Guard said they are doing everything they can to try and find the sub.
We were notified by the operator of the submersible vessel that it was overdue, and it had 5 persons on board the submersible. So we're working very closely at this point to make sure that we're doing everything that we can do to locate the submersible and rescue those on board. The location of the search is approximately 900 miles east of Cape Cod, in a water depth of roughly 13,000 feet. It is a remote area, and it is a challenge to conduct a search in that remote area, but we are deploying all available assets to make sure that we can locate the craft and rescue the people on board.
OceanGate has released a statement saying for some time we've been unable to establish communications with one of our submersible exploration vehicles, which is currently visiting the wreck site of the Titanic. Our entire focus is on the well-being of the crew, and every step possible is being taken to bring 5 crew members back safely.
They add, we are deeply grateful for the urgent and extensive assistance we're receiving from multiple government agencies and deep-sea companies as we seek to re-establish contact with the submersible. We pray for the safe return of the crew and passengers, and we will provide updates as they are available.
Joining us now is an oceanographer from the University of Southampton, Dr. Simon Boxall. Dr. Boxall, good morning. Thanks for joining us this morning. In your studies, in your experience, how critical is this situation?
It's very critical. They're in a very difficult situation here. They're sitting in 4 kilometres, 13,000 feet of water. That's the limit of the sub's capability anyway. They're in a very deep part of the ocean. They're a long way from the coast as well, so getting any sort of rescue attempt to them is going to take time. And there are very few vessels that are capable of going to those sorts of depths. The other problem is there's no easy communication method for that sort of depth. You cannot communicate with things like radios and things underwater. They're reliant on a series of sort of sonic clicks. And that's assuming that the receiver they have on the submarine is actually working. They've not heard anything from the submarine. It's all very quiet. As you said, time is getting short. They have enough oxygen to last them until Thursday.
And of course, we know obviously how long it took for us to discover Titanic, and the size compared to the submersible significant gives you an idea of how difficult this search is going to be. Tell us a little bit about what the ocean floor is like there, because it's my understanding there are lots of deep trenches that the submersible could be hiding in, and it would be very, very difficult to, as you say, not only find it but then recover it.
Well, we know how difficult it's been, impossible so far, to find MH370. That was sort of an intensive 1 year of searching. Now, we do know the location of this submarine more accurately than we did of MH370, which was lost in the Indian Ocean 5 or 6 years ago. So, we do know roughly where the submarine should be, but it's still looking at a very large area. And the submarine is mainly built of carbon fibre, which means that it doesn't have a particularly good magnetic signature. It's very difficult to find. The technology we need to find it is not necessarily on hand. So it's a question of getting that technology out there. They're beyond the reach of helicopters and things, so they are waiting for surface ships really to get to them to support them out there in their search.
Well, Doctor, that search, we know there are no communications. Communications have been lost. But the sub itself, it could be underwater. It could be on the surface, though, couldn't it?
If it was on the surface, they would have other communication. If they're on the surface, they would be able to use radios. And I'm assuming they have some form of radio communication for surface use. But if once it's below the surface, it could be at any depth. It could be 10 meters beneath the surface. It could be on 4 kilometers, 13,000 feet. So once it's below the surface, they will lose all radio communication. Now, also, the sub itself is sealed from the outside. They wouldn't be able to escape at those depths anyway. So this idea that they could sort of open a hatch and escape at 4 kilometers, you'd be crushed. And to be honest with you, at most depths, you'd be crushed. So unless they are very close to the surface, then they have a problem. If they're on the surface, there could be communication.
Lots of focus naturally on the British-born billionaire who's on board, Hamish Harding, and I understand he has a Guinness World Record for the longest duration at the bottom of the sea in the Mariana Trench, and I think he was down on the bottom of the floor for 4 hours and 15 minutes, so he's already exceeded his own record. What are the impacts on the human body if you are at these sorts of depths for prolonged periods? Because obviously there are issues when you come back up, but could they, if they were found, be okay at those sorts of depths for a long time?
You keep in mind that they're in they're in a sort of a sealed submarine, so the pressure they're at is still going to be close to atmospheric pressure. So it's a bit like on an aircraft. You go in an aircraft, you are at slightly lower pressure than you would normally be, but when you land again, you haven't gone from a vacuum to sort of full atmospheric pressure. It's the same with one of these subs. You're at sort of atmospheric pressure in the submarine. So once you're at the surface, it's fine. You're looking at very, very small increase in pressure. So it's not like a diver coming up from, say, 50, 60 meters and then having to worry seriously about the bends. That's not the case in this case. They are at atmospheric pressure.
Doctor, I'm assuming, I may be presumptuous here, that you have been on board something like this or something similar to this. Isabel was saying this morning, even just talking about this makes her claustrophobic. What would conditions on board be like?
I have been on something quite as deep as this. The sort of thing I've been on, been sort of like a Michelin Man dive suit type thing, which will take you down a few hundred meters. But the sort of conditions are going to be cramped, very cramped. These things aren't designed for comfort; they're designed for adventure. It'll be hot, ironically, usually in one of these things. You would think of it as being cold, but they tend to be quite hot. And of course, you are in. They're taking the maximum number of people they can get into the submarine to make optimum use of it. It's going to be crowded as well. And they are down there, these things are designed to be down there for a few hours at most, certainly not days. So they'll always carry additional oxygen. So if they do hit problems, they have that additional oxygen. But it's going to be worrying. And of course, we're assuming they've got power with light. It could well be it's dark as well. We don't know what's gone wrong with this thing. That's the problem.
And forgive me for asking this, but, it's a natural question. I mean, what sort of bathroom facilities would you have on a submersible like this? If you've got people who are in a very stressful, close... Right, OK.
You don't. There are no... There'd be sort of a bottles of beer and that sort of thing, but that will be it. There aren't... we are talking here about sort of being crammed in a very, very, very small area, very small space. The problem is you need to make it small because you need to withstand those very high pressures. The pressures of that depth we're talking about 400 atmospheres of depth. That's a phenomenal pressure.
Yeah. Professor, you are there in Southampton from where Titanic made its last maiden voyage. I'm from Belfast, where Titanic was built. The curse of this ship, it seems to live on.
No, not really. I mean, the Titanic story is one of tragedy. But as with all things, all tragedies have some good outcomes. And the Titanic brought in so many safety mechanisms we see now at sea for seafarers in terms of radio communication, in terms of protocols, in terms of sufficient life rafts, that sort of thing. So the Titanic was a tragedy, disaster, but it led to all kinds of new safety things. The big problem we've got now is that going into the ocean into submersibles is a risky thing to do. If things go wrong, there are no backups, there are no support mechanisms when you're at those sorts of depths. And as I said, I think people assume we can send the Navy in. Naval submarines cannot reach the sort of depths that this thing can go to. They are literally scratching the surface. And we can't see the thing, we can't see through the water, we can't see it visually, we can't use radar. We are reliant very heavily on using a thing called side scan, and even that has to be towed at deep depths, and it's a very specialized piece of equipment. It's like an underwater radar using sound, but it's not a simple task at all.
Well, our thoughts and prayers with everybody on board. And Professor, Doctors, I really appreciate your analysis and your time this morning at such short notice on this. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, nightmare scenario, really. Absolutely horrifying, and sort of thing you see in films and you can't actually believe it's real. It also reminds me of those awful stories, different, but also the sort of race against time. There were all those children trapped in those caves in Thailand, do you remember? And there were the likes of, I think it was even Elon Musk trying to assist with that.
Yeah, he put forward the idea of a mini sub.
Right.
But they poo-hooed that because it couldn't make its way around the various caverns.
And you can imagine all of the greatest minds, and obviously, Hamish Harding will be incredibly well connected and not short of resources. So they will be trying everything humanly possible. I don't like their chances. Don't know about you.
Well, as I say, thoughts and prayers with them all. 30 minutes past 6 o'clock. MPs have voted overwhelmingly to back what turned out to be a damning report that found Boris Johnson lied to Parliament about Partygate.
Well, 7 MPs voted against the Privileges Committee's findings in what was a humiliating defeat, and it means the former Prime Minister's parliamentary pass has now been revoked.
Joining us now, political correspondent for The Spectator, James Heal. I was looking at the Partygate video and I swore I saw you in it. Honestly, there was this guy.
Not guilty.
Not guilty. There was this guy and he looked very like you, and I said, is that James?
You know what? The embarrassing is not even the first person to say that, so I'm not sure what it says
James,
about
I'm so
how identical
sorry.
I look, but no, it wasn't me, don't worry.
It wasn't you, it wasn't you. What do you think should happen now as regards that video and the people in it?
Well, I think it's a difficult one in the sense of, they're now going to be investigated by the Metropolitan Police. And what was interesting is that Smart Rowley, the chief of the commission, was saying yesterday that, look, it looks like it's going to end up with a fine for those guys. And then, of course, what happens next? I mean, what's quite interesting is a couple of those people in the video are now working on the campaign for one of the mayoral candidates for next year's Tory candidates. So it remains to be seen if that's going to have any kind of fallout. The candidate in question, Mr Hussain, is running as a clean slate candidate, so will that damage his chances? Probably. But it's going to be another reminder that Partygate continues to haunt the Tories.
Well, the vote yesterday in support of the Parliamentary Committee, were you expecting, I certainly wasn't expecting it to be so damningly in favour of the committee and so against? Has Boris Johnson got no friends?
Well, he called off the dogs, didn't he?
Yeah, so I think you could see which way it was going on Friday, and he sent out this briefing, saying he didn't see the point in this vote. He thought it would be an irrelevant kind of vote. It would be a line that it wouldn't matter, basically. So all his allies basically chose to stay away. I was talking to a couple of them yesterday, and they said, well, we don't really want to dignify this. We don't want to be seen as going along with this process, so we're not going to go and turn up and vote. And of course, actually, that has the practical effect of not showing how few supporters Boris Johnson had in Parliament. He still had 7 Tory MPs who were willing to troop through the lobby on different grounds.
Although actually it was 6 Tory MPs and 1 Labour. It was the Labour chief whip because he triggered the vote. So one of those 7, I want to point out, is Labour. So it's only actually 6 Conservatives who ended up voting against the report.
And of course, I think that's an indication is that Labour wanted this vote because Labour wanted to show how little support Boris Johnson had, and also they want to be able to put on their attack adverts in all those constituencies. Your MP voted and didn't vote to condemn Boris Johnson, including, of course, the Prime Minister, who chose not to vote yesterday.
Interesting, Harriet Harman said there will now be a second report into those MPs who undermined the work of the committee and calling it a kangaroo court and the like, and she addressed directly those criticisms that were being levelled by Jacob Rees-Mogg yesterday in the chamber. Meaning
they will face disciplinary action, yeah?
Yeah, so, I mean, this is obviously a very difficult question when you get into what can't you say about the Privileges Committee, obviously a parliamentary committee, and basically they think that the abuse sustained throughout this process, including attacks on the integrity of the members involved, and the process itself, as commissioned by the House, warrants a second report. So we'll wait to see what the outcome of that will be. I do think there's sort of 2 different issues here, one of which is people who are defending Boris Johnson purely on personal grounds, and others objecting on sort of slightly constitutional grounds, people like Bill Cash, which may be slightly different arguments, which do have a risk of being conflated. But it remains to be shown by how much this parliamentary committee process can get politicised.
So this is about regaining respect and authority for the institutions of Parliament.
Yes.
Right, so it's saying, don't mock this. These are the rules we've all got to play by, and we will enforce them.
Yes, quite. And, misleading the House, what are the fines for that? And basically, if the MPs don't regulate themselves, it's going to be left to someone else to bring in an outside regulator, and most of them don't want that.
Boris Johnson, I see on the front of the Times this morning, has sent out an olive branch to Rishi Sunak wanting to call a ceasefire and deciding that actually it's in his long-term best interests not to keep agitating.
Yes, I mean, look, I think what's remarkable is how much this story has changed over the last 12 days or so. You know, when Boris Johnson made his kind of preemptive statement on Partygate, he was really getting his side out before the Privileged Committee. He was talking about things such as, a UK-US free trade deal, spelling out a policy platform, talking about cutting taxes. And now, of course, he sort of seems to have seen which way the vote went and sort of got scuttled back from that. So I think basically he's now going to remain on the sideline, throwing rocks when convenient, sallying forth whenever he sees an opportunity. But for now, it looks like kind of those hostilities have gone back to a ceasefire for now.
OK, James, with that, thank you very much indeed. We'll see you again.
Are you sure you weren't in that video?
I promise you. That's my story.
Is he your cousin? No. Thank you. Inflation. We're going to hear more about this morning. 8.7% in April, over 4 times what the Bank of England had in mind. Millions of households struggling. The number of people using food banks in Gillingham has risen by a factor of 20 over the last 2 years.
Well, our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan, went to Kent to meet the street angels in the town.
Gillingham Street Angels in Kent, a food bank so busy it can barely cope. Those queuing for free groceries aren't just the homeless and those on benefits. With food prices 20% up on a year ago, even some with full-time jobs are struggling to buy enough to eat.
I'm a nurse, a registered nurse at Medway Hospital.
So you work full-time and you still need to come to the food bank?
Because our salary can't cover our rent, our basic needs.
And there's always been a queue here. Always, hundreds and hundreds of people.
And this is why. Every day, Street Angels collects food donated by local supermarkets. This load is from Morrison's, then gives it away. Neil Sharlick, once homeless himself, launched this charity 5 years ago. Street Angels gets some council funding, but survives on volunteer staff and community donations.
I'm glad I'm not in politics because I don't understand it, but something's going wrong somewhere along the line, and it's putting pressure. It's putting pressure on the voluntary sector, charities, because we're the people picking up the pieces and doing what we can.
2 years ago, this food bank had 800 visitors a month. The rising cost of living has pushed numbers up 20-fold to 17,000 monthly, with visitors allowed 4 main items at a time. Street Angels avoids paperwork and income checks. Neil reckons around 1 in 10 visitors don't need to use this food bank, but that's still a 90% success rate.
My own personal policy on this is that for every 10 people that come here, 9 good, 1 is bad. If I waste my time policing the 1 bad and trying to catch the 1 bad, I'm wasting my time. I want to spend my time on the 9 good people that generally need our services.
Anti-poverty campaigners say the use of food banks to counter hunger is rising across the country.
I think that what we're seeing is a level of hunger, of destitution across the country, which is really unacceptable, and I think which the public are more and more concerned about. And we do need to see much greater action from the government on this. I mean, we saw last year, we provided nearly 3 million food parcels. That is a record high. It is higher than, that worst part of the pandemic. It was 37% up on the previous year. And that is part of a longer term trend.
Here in Gillingham, Street Angels users are grateful to Neil Charlick and his team.
You're always able to put something on the table, so that's what really matters at the end of the day. Everyone's suffering the crisis, and, we just need to help each other out and just be humble.
But some feel ministers simply don't understand how many ordinary people live.
Well, let them live a day in the life of someone that's poor or because they have no money, and then let them suffer like we do daily.
So what's your message to the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak?
Pull your finger out your backside and sort the cost of living out.
Liam Halligan, GB News in Gillingham.
Right, with the time at 21 minutes past 6, let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories.
For 6 million people with disabilities will receive a one-off £150 cost of living payment. The government says the payment is part of a £100 billion support package for vulnerable households. Those who are eligible will receive the payment automatically.
The Housing Secretary says the UK faces an urgent need to build more homes as the population grows. Michael Gove says that house building could not be looked at purely in numbers, but was instead about creating homes and settlements for future generations. He claimed that quality was just as much a priority as the number of houses.
New research suggests taking regular daytime naps could be good for your brain health. It could slow the rate at which your brain shrinks as you age, according to research carried out at University College London. The study suggests the average difference in brain volume between people programmed to be habitual nappers and those who are not was equivalent to 2.5 to 6.5 years of aging. There's something about this research which talks about what constitutes a nap, the duration. Now, to me, a nap would have to be about 45 minutes or an hour, but they're saying that...
Maximum half an hour, optimum 10 minutes. But these are for normal people who've had a full night's sleep, not people like us who get up in the middle of the night and are broken all the time. So I tell myself we're allowed a little bit more in the day because we're short at night.
But 10 minutes wouldn't do it for me. If I nodded off for 10 minutes, I would feel cheated waking up after 10 minutes.
Try it, though. You might be surprised. You might feel... My trouble with doing the 10-minute nap is I don't know at which point I've fallen asleep. So if I knew exactly when I'd fallen asleep, I could wake myself up. But at least if I set an alarm for an hour, which is what I tend to do, on the days I'm working, then I know I haven't overslept, but I always feel like death after a nap. I feel worse for it.
Yes.
It gets me through the evening.
I know what you mean. I know what you mean. My wife is very good. My wife comes to me and says, "Are you sleeping? Are you sleeping?" You know, and you wake out of your skin. And my answer usually... Oh, I can't even tell you my answer because we're all...
I can imagine.
But I just think, you know, why does it sap her enjoyment of life that I am sleeping, as she always adds, again? Are you sleeping again? What? You know?
Well, it's good for brain health.
But I'm not sleeping now that you've shouted in my ear, am I?
That's cruel to wake someone up from a lovely nap. But, you know, they say it's good for the brain. This is new
sleeping again,
research.
are you?
But apparently, we talked about it a few weeks ago, there was a recent survey about siestas and the countries where siestas are part of the culture.
Yes.
They have a big problem with obesity and heart problems. So, you know, is it actually good overall, holistically for your health? It might make your brain younger, but could you actually end up having other problems if you sleep too much in the day? Because it means you're not being physically active. We'll find out later on. We've got a sleep expert talking to us about all of that.
Oh. Does Lionel Richie sing? Does he sing Fiesta Forever or does he sing Siesta?
Well, Siesta Forever sounds good to me. Let's go with that. But I'm pretty sure it's Fiesta.
All night long. Yeah. All night long. Could you imagine what it'd be like to sleep all night long?
Oh, no. Can only dream.
Only dream. I have quite a lot of nightmares.
Do you?
Yeah, do you have nightmares?
Sometimes, yeah. And I find that if I wake up from a nightmare, my brain wants to go back to the nightmare to finish it.
Oh, to sort
and
things out.
I have to really consciously get up and have a drink of water or whatever to stop myself falling back into my nightmare.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Break the sequence of that. Are you sleeping?
Right.
You know what's nice is that it's lovely to have a sleep like 2 o'clock in the afternoon or something. That would be that's your siesta, isn't it? Whereas if we lived in Spain or something, you would be praised for that. Look at him and he's enjoying his siesta. It's lovely. He's empowering his brain. His brain's growing in size all the time, like some alien entity, life form. Look how intelligent he is. He's sapping the information and his brain is growing in power and knowledge. But no, are you sleeping? Anyway, are you sleeping? Get up. It's 6:25.
Yeah, stay with us as I'm going to let you read this one. There's a football title for you there.
Yes,
I've got no idea what that says.
No idea.
Boy.
Saka, his name's Saka. Anyway, he played for England last night at Old Trafford, so he did. And he scored a treble there against Macedonia. You and I could score a treble against Macedonia, really. I wouldn't be building it up too much. Paul Coyte takes you through the home nation's Euros next.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Very nice to see you again. Still to come this morning.
We have lots for you in our packed programme as we enter peak wedding season amidst a cost of living crisis. At 10 to 7, we're finding out clever ways that couples are footing the bill for their big day.
Yeah, don't have it. It's the best way.
You're romantic.
So what's this?
You.
We're also going to be talking to a sleep scientist who explains why a quick 40 winks could be very, very good for you. You take 40 winks often, regularly. Apparently your brain doesn't shrink. As a matter of fact, it grows. And if your brain grows enough to operate your, what is that? Is that a website or a Twitter account? gbviews@gbnews.com. What is that?
What is what?
gbviews@gbnews.com.
That's your email.
It's an email?
Yeah.
Right, okay. Or you can tweet at GB News as well. My phone broke yesterday. I have a very fancy phone, a folding phone, and it fell, it slipped out of my pocket, it hit the floor, and now only one side of it works. So
there's nothing worse.
This side is completely blank, but
Yeah.
the trouble is everything spreads over 2 pages. So people are texting me, people are WhatsApping me, people
And
are
you can't
emailing
read
me.
half of it.
Can't read it.
Whereas mine suddenly decided to overheat. So every time I'm touching my phone, it's like a little firebomb, and I'm
Yeah.
thinking, what's happening? Is this about to
Yes.
explode? But we need our phones. Lost without our phones.
So desperate, so lost without it.
Mhm.
Are you sleeping? Yeah.
I bet you I've got messages from Ruth if I check my phone.
Yeah.
Maybe she's sleeping. Catching up on her.
She never sleeps. Well, that's a lie. Not
Not in the day.
She said last night she was going to bed early and she said, I'm going to have difficulty sleeping. She never has difficulty sleeping. She sleeps like a log.
Get up to
But then she never
see you in the
stops during the
morning.
day.
Yeah, she's hard.
She'd never take a nap. I would say to her, why don't you just take a nap? No, she wouldn't do that. She says, but you do think it affects you for your evening sleep?
I sometimes do. Beginning of the week, I can't do it because then I can't get to sleep in the evening. Later in the week, I'm so tired that I can't get through the day without a quick nap.
Do you ever
But
think of
often I've got
changing
things
job?
going on. I often think about that, yeah. Because causing to lots of research, it causes Alzheimer's getting up in the night. Anyway, that's another story.
Dear, 6:30 is the time. Looking through the back pages, they stack up like this. Now, I finish them off. The Mail says Stuart Broad called on the Edgbaston crowd to inspire England to victory in the Ashes today. However, the Mirror says it's squeaky brum time as the Test match rests on a knife edge. And it's a sackload of goals for Sacco as the Arsenal forward bags his first hat-trick against North Macedonia Why are they getting so excited about all that? I mean, it's North
I don't know. What can you do, eh? North Macedonia.
I mean, if they didn't score...
They're not that bad. North Macedonia, I mean, they were good against Italy. They
part of Greece or something.
Well, they stopped Italy getting into the World Cup.
Did they?
But 7... But you know what? I hate using any cliches, but you can only beat what's in front of you, Eamonn.
You can.
That's what, you know what I mean? You do what you can. 7,
you can.
Last game of the season, not very good. But it's the cricket, really. I'm more excited about the cricket. And I mean, talking about a nap, I almost missed having my nap watching the cricket yesterday, and I didn't move away from it all day. It's just so exciting. Now, I know you still need a little convincing when it comes to the cricket,
No, mate,
right?
it's not that. Honestly, it was never part of my culture. I was never brought up with it. I do respect it. I have a lot of respect for what's involved in it. I think it's a brave person's sport. And I also learned there's a women's Ashes as well.
Starts on Thursday. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So England need... It boils down to this. England needs 7 more wickets to win the first test in the Ashes. Australia need 174 runs. So that's it. It's as simple as that. It got to the end last night because England then once they were all out for 273, then Australia came in and they got to 61 without loss, and we got 40 minutes left and thinking they're just going to walk this, and then it starts. Then we get a wicket. Then we get another wicket. We get Marcus Labuschagne, who is the #1 batsman in the world. He's out. Steve Smith, the really famous one, who was involved in the ball tampering, you know, when they used the sandpaper for the nodding. Yes, absolutely. But anyway, Steve Smith, he's out. I couldn't tell you which way it's going to go. It's on a knife edge, and another cliche, but it's so exciting. So
Do you know
really,
summer sport. I mean, summer sport's lovely, wonderful, and you and I are going to the GGs tomorrow. But I often, as a kid, I used to look and think, how does anybody have time to go to Henley, Wimbledon?
No, my hubby's
the
off to
test
Queen's
matches,
today.
To watch the tennis?
To the tennis, yeah. And, you know, people got to do work as well.
I know, but I always wondered, I always pass by golf courses during the day and look with envy and say, how do they have time to do all that?
It's a mystery.
Incredible. We only talk about it, don't we? We don't do it. We talk about it.
It's true. Yeah.
It's true. Could I just go back and talk about the other Euro qualifiers, because Northern Ireland and Wales were both in action last night, sad results for both of them.
Yeah, Wales are struggling. I mean, Wales are definitely struggling at the moment. Rob Page who's the boss there. I don't know how long he's going to last, though. To qualify then for Euro 24, so they lost 2-0 to Turkey. There were 2 disallowed Turkish goals, plus a save penalty. So they were well beaten last night. They lost to Armenia the other evening as well. So it really isn't looking good for Wales. Northern Ireland lost to Kazakhstan, I'm afraid.
At home.
At home, yeah. So did we work out where Kazakhstan is? A long way away, I think, is the answer.
Yeah.
It is a fair old way, but not a good result for Northern Ireland.
They scored late as well.
They did.
88 minutes.
But Scotland are playing Georgia tonight, and Scotland are looking fantastic. Beat Norway the other day, and they've played 3, and they've got 9 points.
That's
so again, beating what's in front of them, looking very good for Germany for next year.
On the subject of being in Scotland, Brendan Rodgers back to Celtic. That surprised me.
Yeah.
I just thought there was a little bit of bad blood when he left Celtic last time.
Yeah.
And but I'd just be interested, if you're a Celtic supporter, let us know what your view on that. I mean, I think Brendan is top man, top manager. He keeps the pedigree right up there after your new guy.
Postecoglou, yeah. See, it's with Brendan Rodgers, it's either the prodigal son returns or as it's the traitor has turned up back at Celtic Park again. So there's 2 ways of looking at it. But if he gets success, anything like that is forgotten because nobody cares. You want your team to win.
And
so if it works out...
3-year deal he's on.
3-year deal. I mean, he did the treble and then he left in the middle of the season, went to Leicester, and obviously everybody was very unhappy about that, and now he's gone back again. There are, from most of the Celtic fans I've spoken to, some are like, don't want him back after what he did to us. Others are like, yeah, welcome back with open arms. It seems like a good deal to me. To look from the outside, I think he sounds like it's a good bet to get him back again. He's going to want to do well. They're going to want to do well. And if he does start doing well, then everybody will have him again.
New manager, Bournemouth.
Yeah, now this is Andoni Iraola, and we've spoken about him before because he's a manager. He's one of these new managers that everybody wants to get their hands on. Rayo Vallecano in Spain, he walked away from. I know there was talk about him going to Spurs, there was talk about him going to Leeds. Bournemouth had Gary O'Neill there. Now, Gary O'Neill...
He kept them up.
He did keep them up, but the last 4 games, they didn't win. And Gary O'Neill did a job, but it's one of those things where, well, what do? Do we just stick with what we have, or do we think, right, let's step up a notch? And I think it's probably a good move for Bournemouth. You know, they've got... It's a real statement of intent. Bill Foley is an American owner, comes from Vegas. He's probably looking at Brighton and thinking, that's where we want to be. They're doing really well, they're making loads of money, they're having success. So it'll probably work out for them. So I think it's a very good decision. Sad for Gary O'Neill because, again, like you say, kept him up. But to move forward, sometimes you've got to make changes.
Mr. Paul, thank you very much indeed, my friend. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Right, stay with us. Should school teachers let their students identify as horses and dinosaurs?
Sorry, what?
Follows on from a child being allowed to identify as a cat. We'll be talking about this with Norman.
So wait a minute, some
Baker
kid wakes up and says meow in the morning, and then you've got to sort of feed it milk or something. Papers next.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
What we're going to do now is run through the front pages for you. Here they go. We begin with the Telegraph, the Titanic mission, featuring heavily, including on this newspaper as well. They profile the British billionaire Hamish Harding, who's one of the 5 still missing on the sub bound for the Titanic wreck.
The Mail says the air's running out of the Titanic tourist submarine as the search continues 12,500 feet below the surface of the Atlantic.
Times believes Boris Johnson wants a ceasefire with Rishi Sunak after MPs backed the findings of the Downing Street party scandal.
The Eye is leading on the Bank of England's experts' prediction that mortgage rates will stay high until 2025. That's as new interest rates are due this week.
Nothing much to look forward to there. We've got, what, the inflation figures at 8 o'clock, or is it 7? Got them out this morning anyway. Here's the Metro. Hold on to your hats as they capture a photograph of the Princess of Wales. She has a spotted headpiece and dress during the Order of the Garter ceremony yesterday. What are you wearing for the races tomorrow?
I haven't quite decided.
You what?
I haven't quite decided, but something with a bit of pink and green. I've got 2 dress options and a cream hat with some pink flowers and some ivory netting.
Very good.
Actually, Ellie Costello's going to be at Ascot later in the programme for us, and she always puts together a fab outfit. So
A good
we'll have a look at
ensemble.
what she's wearing.
Let's go through the newspapers now in more detail. We've got Norman Baker and we've got Davinia Taylor with those. Very nice to see you, both folks. Norman, this Titanic submersible, Isabel was saying this morning, even just talking about it makes her claustrophobic.
It makes me gasp for air.
Well,
I feel panicky.
The question in my mind is why on earth would anyone want to go down to the depths of the ocean to look at a graveyard, effectively, because that's what it is. I think the whole thing is rather gruesome, and I just don't see the attraction of it at all. I mean, obviously, it's very sad for these people. The Titanic will probably, sadly, claim more victims because I don't think it's going to be very easy to get these people out. But, you know, there's also a massive cost, I suppose, to the rescue operation from trying to find these people. So I don't know. It's a sad story all round, but, you know, if you want to do something exciting, I wouldn't be going to the bottom of the ocean.
That would be it for you. Davinia?
Oh, not a cat and house chance. No, thank you. I'm not going down there. And I don't understand what the attraction is.
No.
I mean, you can't actually see anything. I get the whole going up into orbit, seeing planet Earth. What an amazing experience. I mean, if I was a billionaire, I'd be more inclined to do that. In fact, I probably wouldn't do either. It's both very dangerous.
Yeah.
You know.
What about the argument that I have heard from some quarters that these are people who are extremely rich, detached from most people's reality, who are going through really tough times at the moment, and now all this money is being thrown into trying to rescue them. Of course, it's tragic that these people are stuck in horrible conditions, no toilet, possibly no light, and running out of air. Nightmare scenario. But should taxpayers' money be being spent on this? Because I was hearing that, you know, Canadian, you know, taxpayers' funds are being put into trying to rescue these billionaires.
You can't just say leave them there.
Yeah, but should it not just be resourced by him?
He's a billionaire.
Yeah.
He's a billionaire, this guy. I don't know what the rest of them are like, but presumably they're all quite wealthy and they paid a lot to go down there. The operation to save them will cost a great deal of money. He ought to pay for it if he's rescued, quite frankly. We had the same thing before, do you remember, when we had people who were not trained, who were irresponsibly climbing mountains, costing a vast fortune to be rescued time and again, £40,000 a time, and then writing about them in the papers, and getting money from one of the papers to write their story.
Of course,
but we were paying for the rescue.
Yeah.
OK.
Oh dear.
God, I'm glad you two aren't on the end of a 999 switchboard. Hello,
Brought it on yourself.
Got a rescue here. We're stuck up a mountain. Well, you shouldn't be there. Forget that. Davinia.
What is going on here?
Oh, this is just ridiculous. My kids are in a very sort of traditional school, like a Catholic school, so I know this isn't happening where my boys are. But there's a school in Sussex that seems to have gotten in a bit of trouble because one of the pupils decided to identify as a cat. And, you know, I mean, this is like a 13-year-old only answering in English lessons with a meow, and the child's not been... I mean, to be honest, it's a red flag. There is something going on with this child that needs to be brought to the authorities.
And do you know what? It's not the child's problem or fault. It's the adults around the child who enable this. You know, it's... Look, I've woken up wanting to be a cowboy or an astronaut in my time, but people don't sit and indulge me and say, yes, Eamonn, I put on your oxygen tank and whatever. What a lot of nonsense.
It is. The word indulgent is right, and it's so distracting for other children. You know, if you're in a school environment, you've all got to focus. You've got exams to pass. That's why you're there. You know, you're not there to distract other children. And I'd be absolutely fuming as a parent that this is going on. And I think teachers are actually scared because of the whole gender identification and if they get in trouble. I mean, a friend of mine is a teacher and she's leaving the industry. She's been an English teacher for 20 years and she said, I misgendered someone and I got really reprimanded. She said, I just cannot do my job.
Yeah.
She's literally treading on eggshells, so she's left, you know?
And do you think that it is effectively, some people are saying, you know, it's because that people are wanting to be identified with however they feel that this is being allowed? I mean, do you see them as the same thing, i.e. you are entitled to identify as a dinosaur if you want in this day and age?
Well, I don't think children are. I think
you're
children
born as a dinosaur, but you feel like one.
Well, I think children are to be guided until they reach a particular age. If you want to identify yourself as a cat when you're 18,
But what's the
that's
difference
fine.
between that person and somebody who says they want to identify as a girl when they're born as a boy?
Well, I think we need to be very, very careful with anybody who's a minor, because they haven't completely formed their personality and you don't quite know where they're going. And certainly to take action on their bodies, which is irreversible in some cases when they're young, seems to me to be completely wrong. But I just feel Davinia's point is right. I feel really sorry for the teachers. I had, when I was an MP in my constituency, I had a teacher who was in a corridor and just saying, move along there to some lad, put his hand gently on his shoulder. The lad took out his phone and called the police, and the police turned up for this alleged assault. It's just incredible. Another case I had where a boy got under a table and wouldn't come out, and the whole class had to be evacuated out to the playground until one of the parents turned up. You know, why couldn't the teacher just yank him out?
Because he was under the table. He felt that he had to hide there, or...
Well, who knows why he was there, but the point is he was disrupting the rest of the class.
I hate to mean this or laugh, but when I think of, and I'm sure you're the same, Norm, when you think of your school days and, you know, dusters thrown at you, whacked around the back of the head, and you can sit and say, well, it didn't do me any harm. But I do think that if a lot of this stuff went on with my kids today, I would have an issue with it. However, children are children. And, you know, they don't always get it right, and they have to be told and guided, I think, as well. And no, son, you're not a cat, right? You're 8 years of age, you do this, now get over there before you get a kick up the backside.
But this is the problem we've created as a society, because we've said to people, you can say you're a woman even if you're born as a man, then you can start saying you're anything. I identify as French, I identify as a cat, I identify as a fish.
And it's super distracting in the whole school anyway, because if I was a kid and I wanted to get out of physics, I would absolutely identify as a cat. Waste a whole hour arguing about it, and then that's that lesson done. Off we go.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, completely.
The kids
hated physics.
I hated physics. I still don't understand physics.
I hate physics. I liked chemistry, though.
Hated chemistry.
Did you?
Yeah.
I liked... no, I couldn't stand mathematics. I couldn't relate to maths at all.
It wasn't
and
that
physics.
Way. I liked biology.
But we can identify as a mathematician if we wanted to, so that's fine now.
Except I can pretend that I am, but I'm not. This is the point. You know, I'd like to be a mathematician, but I'm not.
Would you?
I wasn't born one.
It's not the most great thing to aspire to.
No, maybe not.
Well, Isabel, you're of that age now where you've got children who are that delicate age that it's between fantasy land for them. You want to please them, things want to be good and nice and whatever. But if your daughter or son came back and said, "I am a rabbit today," or whatever, would you indulge that?
No, come on. What do you think?
No, you wouldn't.
No, absolutely
You could
not.
feed them letters until they got fed up with it.
They'd soon change, wouldn't they?
Exactly. That's the correct answer. Good idea. Dry cat food for you, darling. Here you go.
But let us know somebody. Do you have a partner, a grown-up partner who identifies as something different?
Who was that guy we were talking about yesterday who was walking around as a cat on Big Brother? Forgotten his name.
George Galloway.
George Galloway.
If your partner is like George Galloway and likes to lick cream from a bowl...
But he was being paid for that.
That's true. Well, maybe other... Anyway, this is going down a whole other avenue. Right, Norman, Boris.
Yes.
What a night. What
well, look, I mean, I think the chickens have come home to roost, is my feeling on this. And, I mean, he behaved appallingly as Prime Minister. I think he had this persona of kind of friendliness and the man down the pub you want to share a pint with and all that kind of thing, and he looked like he was good fun. And I think that persona fooled a lot of people, both in Parliament and indeed outside Parliament, that he was therefore a good Prime Minister. He wasn't. He was a terrible Prime Minister for all sorts of reasons. And I think that that's now been shown by the committee that met, the Privilege Committee, which demonstrated that he had lied to Parliament.
But
you cannot lie to Parliament.
Was it weak of Rishi Sunak not to show
Yes,
up?
it was. And somebody said, Leila Ryan, actually, Lib Dem MP, said on the radio, I think earlier on today, that she had respect for the 7 MPs who voted against the report, because at least they stood up for what they believed in. But the people who are cowardly and didn't turn up at all, they're the ones who are really quite shocking.
One of those 7 was the Labour chief whip, who did it tactically to force a vote.
Well, we just
so it was only
discount
6
him.
of them, yeah.
6 of them. Six of them.
Yeah.
But I mean, you know, they stood up for what they believed in, although I think they were wrong. But the idea that people can just not have a view on this report when you're an MP is quite impossible.
Okay.
OK. Guys, we're just going to say toodle pip to you guys for 40 minutes or so, and then Davinia and Norman will be back again with more stories from the
Just going to ask, do you guys like a power nap? Do you ever have power naps in between paper reviews? We're talking about napping this morning, so you're big believers.
Yes, might have a nap now between
That's
now
a good
and
idea.
next,
Perfect. We'll see you revitalised just after 7:30.
But you are in the mood for one, though, aren't you?
Yeah, I had a bit of a heavy weekend. Not drinking or anything, just a late night, that was all. So I could do the disco nap in about an hour.
Disco nap, I like it.
Sometimes when you're invited to things like weddings, you can doze off. I didn't doze off in yours.
That would be rude. You can't doze off at a
but
wedding.
I'm just saying, sometimes...
People spend a fortune on these things.
I'm alert during funerals, but weddings... But weddings... I do prefer a funeral to a wedding.
That woman inside a coffin.
Huh?
Tapping inside the coffin the
Edgar
other day. That's a whole
Edgar
other
Allan
story,
Poe.
but we've got to talk about weddings anyway. It's summer, wedding season's fully underway, and for many, the joy of getting married is unfortunately...
The joy wears off quite quickly.
...is being dampened by one unavoidable obstacle, and that is...
Dosh, money, paying for
ruining
it.
Everything.
Well, anyway, there's a lot of weddings going on, and prompted by the pandemic, because people couldn't get married in the pandemic, and now it's all coming out. The cost, though, of getting married goes up and up and up and up and up by 6% last year. Anna Riley has the story.
With the rising cost of living making everything more expensive, brides like Fiona set a strict budget for their big day. She recently got married at Sowerby Hall in Yorkshire with 70 guests attending, and through careful organisation spent £4,000 on the whole event, including food, outfits, decor and photography.
I knew from the beginning it wasn't going to be an expensive sort of affair. It just couldn't be. We have 5 children between us, we have a house, we have mortgages, we have bills, which were rapidly increasing at the time. So I think from the start I had a sort of figure that it had to be under at least 5,000. So that sort of really set me off really when I was looking around for dresses and venues, thinking about decorations, bouquets, and it sort of reins you in a little bit because you can go a little bit mad. There's so many lovely things out there that brides want and are geared to sort of entice you in that you've got to say, enough's enough. So I think having that budget really helped me. At the same time, I didn't want to skimp on anything, which is where the homework came in. And I think that's why I've managed to do it, because I did a lot of research.
But what's the average cost of weddings in the UK?
So at Hitched, we surveyed almost 2,500 couples about what they spent on their wedding in 2022. And we found that on average, weddings were costing £18,400. And a lot of people, have a little heart-stop moment when we say that. But that doesn't mean that you have to spend £18,400 on your wedding. Same survey, we asked how many couples felt impacted by the cost of living crisis and the economy, because it has been a bit doom and gloom of late. But 70%, so nearly 3/4, said that they were not impacted by the economy. And I think that is because people want to invest in their weddings, especially post-COVID.
Welcome to Hackness Grange! Wedding venues like Hackness Grange in North Yorkshire have felt the pinch of rising energy and food costs. It's owned by the Gilchrist Collection, who have a portfolio of 9 venues across the UK, but they found ways to keep costs down.
My oldest building is 14th century. If I recall correctly, Hackness is 18th century. Obviously they're big, so they cost a lot to heat and run and fuel. And so obviously those bills have gone through the roof. And we just decided we would sort of suck up the costs on that. We don't really want to try and push those onto our clients. People are always going to get married. They're always going to do it. It's just finding the right suppliers and the right venues and the right things for that person.
So it seems despite a hike in the price of weddings, couples are still saying, I do. Anna Riley, GB News.
I miss wedding season. I've come through that. I remember a stage when it was every weekend, and now I haven't been to a wedding for ages, a couple of years.
Oh, but that'll all come back again.
The divorces will start soon.
Yeah, that's right. 7 years' time and they all get divorced. They get the 7-year itch and then you'll be doing it all again. Coming up, we have the latest on the missing Titanic tourist sub. But first, here's your forecast. Let's go to Aidan McGivern with that.
Hello, a very good morning to you. It's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. It's a wet start in the south today, not all of the south, but some areas are seeing heavy rain. That rain moves north through the morning and into the afternoon, associated with a weather system that's coming out of the continent. And some instability in the atmosphere will lead to a few rumbles of thunder, along with some very wet weather for a short space of time. But it's a short space of time. It quickly moves into the central part of the UK before arriving into northern England by the end of the morning and eventually southern Scotland. In its wake, skies do brighten in the south, but quickly further showers develop. Hit and miss downpours for western Scotland, Northern Ireland, southern and eastern parts of England, and some thunderstorms around as well, even some hail. And fairly heavy rainfall in a short space of time, particularly around eastern England, if temperatures get to the mid to even high 20s, which is possible given some sunny skies this afternoon. Then any showers ease away into the evening. The main area of rainfall clears eastern Scotland, pushing into Shetland during the early hours of Wednesday. With clear skies across much of the country, you'd think it would be a cool night, and it will be cooler for parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, as well as Northern England, for example, but still temperatures in the teens by and large across the country, and in some places holding up at 16 or 17 degrees. But plenty of sunshine first thing tomorrow, especially in the east. I think further west, the cloud will quickly build, and showers already across western Scotland, Northern England and Northern Ireland will move and develop widely across the rest of the UK by the afternoon. Again, a few rumbles of thunder associated with the heaviest downpours, but it's a warm afternoon with temperatures widely low to mid-20s and in some spots 28 or 29 degrees. It turns even hotter later this week as sunnier weather returns to the south, although it will stay changeable across Scotland and Northern Ireland with some wet weather at times.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But
and action.
Sergeant Reed, my superstar panel, they're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News. Britain's watching.
It's a race against time as 5 people remain trapped almost 13,000 feet below the Atlantic Ocean.
Hello there, very good morning to see you at 7 o'clock on the dot. It's Tuesday the 20th of June. You tuned into breakfast here on GB News with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster.
Here's what's leading the news this morning.
We were notified by the operator of the submersible vessel that it was overdue, and it had 5 persons on board the submersible.
The mission to save a Titanic tourist sub continues this morning. One of the passengers on board includes British billionaire Hamish Harding. It's thought the submersible has enough oxygen to last until Thursday.
Ban for Johnson, the former PM, loses his parliamentary pass after MPs backed the report that he deliberately misled Parliament over lockdown parties. The vote was 354 to 7.
More than 6 million disabled people will receive a £150 cost of living one-off payment from today. They're intended to help the most vulnerable households as part of a wider £1,350 support package. And we'll be speaking to the Work and Pensions Minister, Mel Stride, in around 20 minutes.
The power of a power nap, a regular daytime snooze, could be good for your brain health. We'll meet the sleep scientist who tells us how much kip we need and why a quick 40 winks can definitely benefit the size of your brain.
And lots of rain for many yesterday, perhaps some more on the return, but will we see the sun?
Another day of downpours for many of us today, but it turns drier, sunnier and warmer in the south later this week. How high will temperatures go? I'll have the forecast in a bit.
So our top story this morning, the search is continuing for a submersible tourist vessel which was en route to the Titanic shipwreck in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean.
British billionaire Hamish Harding, chairman of private plane firm Action Aviation, is on board the 5-person OceanGate Expeditions vessel, which was reported overdue on Sunday evening, 435 miles south of Newfoundland.
Well, during a press conference, Rear Admiral John W. Morgar of the US Coast Guard said they're doing everything they can to try and find the lost adventurers.
We're working very closely at this point to make sure that we're doing everything that we can do to locate the submersible and rescue those on board. The location of the search is approximately 900 miles east of Cape Cod, in a water depth of roughly 13,000 feet. It is a remote area, and it is a challenge to conduct a search in that remote area.
Let's get more analysis on this. David Scott Bedard is chair of British Titanic Society. David, hello there. Thanks for talking to us this morning. There's a lot of irony associated with this. You know, the curse of the Titanic seems to live on.
It certainly seems that way, Eamonn. Obviously, our thoughts first and foremost are with the family and the crew. And as we all follow the news, we're patiently hoping that they can be brought home safely.
David, we're trying to work out, and not a lot of people we've spoken to around the office today would sort of say, you know, this would be on their wish list to do. It seems a pretty scary venture, bearing in mind where the wreck is situated, how far down it is, how remote it is as well. What is the attraction of Titanic to these Titanic tourists?
Well, they're not just tourists, Eamonn. Everyone who takes part in these dives has a particular mission to carry out. I'm sure we all saw in the news just a few weeks ago the recent mapping, the 3D mapping that's been carried out in the wreck. That's made up of thousands of photographs, and they were taken by people such as the tourists, as you just called them, the mission people, the specialists who take part in these dives. But yes, it is remote, it is extremely dangerous, and the risks are made perfectly clear to everyone before they undertake these dives.
Likely do you think it is that they'll be able to find this submersible, given that it took 73 years after the Titanic sank before they were able to find that? I mean, this part of the sea, give us a picture of, you know, the trenches and the challenges involved.
Yes, Isabel, it's an incredibly difficult dive. These dives have been going on since the wreck was discovered in 1985. And of course, the original dives, including the filming for James Cameron's movie, were carried out by 2 Russian submersibles, which are no longer in operation. And the OceanGate Titan, this particular submersible, is the only one currently capable in commercial use, I believe, that can take passengers down to the wreck. So it is going to make the rescue mission incredibly difficult. It's one of only 5, I believe, submersibles that can reach this depth.
Not asking for specific figures, but I'm just asking, would you know the sort of ballpark figure it would cost to be on board a submarine like this?
I believe the dive price for individuals is $250,000, which is about £195,000.
And what does that buy you? Because, I mean, my understanding is that this incredibly advanced submersible is designed to withstand enormous pressure and going to huge depths, but very few creature comforts. We're not talking about any bathroom facilities. They'll be wearing oxygen masks at this point. I mean, that money is paying for expertise and kit, but not any luxuries or comfort.
No, there are no luxuries or comfort. It's large enough. People can see pictures on the OceanGate's website of the interior as well as the exterior of this Titan submersible. Creature comforts, as you say, are incredibly basic. The vessel is designed to dive to a depth of 4,000 plus meters. Interestingly, it does have what's called a real-time hull health monitoring system, which is a series of sensors all around the hull, which continually monitor the pressure. And should there be any change in the pressure on the outer hull, the pilot is notified immediately and can instigate an ascent quite quickly. So if anything has happened catastrophically, and let's hope and pray it hasn't, because the pressure on the outside of that hull is 3.5 tons per square inch.
Yeah. David, there you are. You are the chair of the British Titanic Society. For people who don't get it, who don't get the thrill involved, the excitement involved, the sense of history involved in this, if you were offered a ticket on a sub like that, would you take it up?
Yes, I would. I've been interested in Titanic for most of my life. It's an honour and a privilege to be the head of what is one of the world's greatest Titanic societies. We have hundreds of members all over the world who study, who are passionate about the vessel. But yes, I would happily take a ticket if I could afford one.
You know, David, we wish all ends well. Our thoughts and prayers with everybody on board, and really appreciate your insight to things. Thanks for your time this morning. Thank you very much indeed. That's David Scott Bedard. He's chair of the British Titanic Society.
Yeah, it really is the stuff of nightmares, and I'm sure that this will probably be at some point turned into some sort of horror movie. But we spoke to an oceanographer, didn't we, in the last hour, who said it's not clear, because we've lost contact with the vessel, whether or not they have any electricity or power. They could be in total darkness. They're in a confined space. They'll be extremely stressed. There are no bathroom facilities.
Hot.
And it could be extremely hot. It just doesn't bear thinking about. And obviously that rescue mission looking for a needle in a haystack, really. If you think it took 73 years to try and find a huge object like the Titanic, and obviously, you know, no radio waves or form of communication with it at the moment, and these deep trenches on the ocean floor.
Very, very inaccessible, so far off the coast as well. But anyway, the people behind the sub are very, very grateful for all the help they are receiving as well. It is now 10 minutes past 7. A very good morning to you. Thanks for your company.
MPs voted last night overwhelmingly to back a damning report that found Boris Johnson had lied to Parliament about Partygate.
When the vote came in, only 7 MPs voted against the Privilege Committee's findings. So that was a humiliating defeat for Boris Johnson. It means that the former Prime Minister's parliamentary pass will now be taken away from him.
Well, joining us now is political correspondent for The Spectator, James Heal. Good morning to you, James. It was unclear how the night was going to play out, really. The debate went on for hours and it looked possible there might not be a vote. And then right at the last minute, Labour forced a vote. So just explain the sort of choreography and theatre, if you like, because there were very impassioned speeches from both sides. And I think it was Jacob Rees-Mogg who sought to defend Boris Johnson, but people like Harriet Harman not only defending what the report found, but her own integrity in the Commons.
Yes, so it began at sort of 4:30 in the afternoon. It's about a 5-hour-long debate, so taking about sort of 40 contributions or so from members across the House. And there were passions, and so there were MPs, for instance, like Jacob Rees-Mogg, who spoke up in defence of Boris Johnson, but then didn't vote for him in the report that subsequently followed the vote. But I was speaking to a lot of Labour people yesterday, and they were saying they were determined to force a vote on this. So what it was going to go, the way it works is basically the Speaker says, does anyone agree with it? There's shouts of ayes and nays, etc. And then if there is sort of nays and dissent, therefore a vote is forced on that issue. So there were Labour MPs shouting up nay, even though, of course, they were going to agree to vote with the report because they wanted to force a division. That meant, of course, that you had to have Tory MPs coming out and decide whether to vote for the report or whether to vote for Boris Johnson. And in the case, only just half a dozen or so Tories actually went and said they're going to vote against this report because they know that in their constituencies there's going to be attack adverts talking about whether your MP voted to back Boris Johnson or not.
What about the Tories that abstained? I mean, lots of people would say that that's endorsing lying to Parliament and perhaps weak of Rishi Sunak not to stand up to Boris Johnson.
Yeah, I think those arguments will be made. Obviously it is the prerogative of a Member of Parliament to do that. Some of them will be saying things like they were paired with other MPs, they were away on business, etc. But I think you're completely right, which is that a lot of MPs, frankly, didn't want to take on their party. They wanted to sort of basically let it go through, and they didn't really want to sort of provoke a fight with people in their constituency, etc. So they would let it go through. I think looking in retrospect now, I think that it's clear that Boris Johnson had less support than was sort of briefed around end of last week.
Well, to be fair, though, he did, the phrases, he called off the dogs, didn't he? Because he said, don't damage your own career defending me, just don't vote.
Yes.
So someone like Nadine Dorries, who half resigned, didn't turn up and vote for him.
But even so, I mean, like last October, he was struggling to get 100 MPs to get on the Tory leadership election. In February, March, thereabouts, there was the Storm and Break vote. He only managed to get 21 MPs following him there. So we were talking about a dozen or so MPs. So I think that's the kind of real shift in his fortunes. As you say, Rishi Sunak, of course, wants to talk about the future, things in the future. But look at the spectacle of yesterday. You had David Cameron in the morning talking to the COVID inquiry about austerity. You had Liz Truss talking about how she didn't like being compared to a lettuce. You had Boris Johnson being savaged on the floor of the House of Commons by Theresa May. Every time Rishi Sunak tries to talk about the future, he gets all these kind of ghosts and demons of the past. And this is what's going to drag him down, I think. And the Conservatives will fight very hard to fight on that election, on that record next election.
Interesting. OK, thanks very much, James.
Thank you. At 10 o'clock this morning, Valdo Calocane, the man arrested on suspicion of murdering Barnaby Webber, Grace O'Malley Kumar and Ian Coates in Nottingham last week, will make his first Crown Court appearance.
It is actually a week today since those terrible attacks in Nottingham. And our East Midlands reporter, Will Hollis, joins us this morning. Will, it will be a brief court appearance this morning, but an important one.
Yes, well, just to give you an idea of how fresh these attacks are in Nottingham, you can still see the helium balloons floating amongst the floral tributes. You can probably see as well in the background that people are on their way to work. And I think this time a week ago, that was the real idea, the indicator that we had a sense that something was wrong in Nottingham. People weren't able to get on the trams. They were stuck on buses for hours. And as the day progressed 1 week ago, we realised that something had really, truly awfully happened in the city centre. We learned that 3 people had been killed in a van and knife attack. 2 people, students here in Nottingham, 19-year-olds Barnaby Webber and Grace O'Malley Kumar, as well as 65-year-old caretaker Ian Coates, working at a local school here in Nottingham. And as the week progressed, we saw that outpouring of grief, not just from the community here in Nottingham at vigils like the one in Market Square, where the floral tributes behind me have been laid, but also around the country. And we saw that outpouring of grief because there was a sense that this could have really happened to anybody. Students just coming back from a night out, people on their way to work. This is very much an active case. And as you say, Valdo Calocane, the 31-year-old Guinea-Bissau dual national with Portuguese heritage with settled status here in the UK. He's making his first appearance today in Crown Court. He's accused of the murder of all 3 victims, as well as the attempted murder of 3 people in an alleged van attack here in the city. This is going to be a bit of a quick hearing we're expecting today. The trial is still probably some months away, but it is still very raw here in Nottingham, and you will see people going along behind me still looking at the flowers, still reading the words that have been written on them, and still with the horror of these attacks still very fresh in their minds.
OK, thank you very much with that, Will.
60 minutes past 7 o'clock. Let's bring you up to date with what else is happening. And over 6 million people with disabilities will receive a one-off £150 cost of living payment from today. The government says the payment is part of a £100 billion package for vulnerable households. Those who are eligible will receive the payment automatically.
The Housing Secretary says the UK faces an urgent need to build more homes as the population is growing. Michael Gove says that house building could not be looked at purely in numbers, but was instead about creating homes and settlements for future generations.
Royal Ascot racegoers are hoping the King and Queen will join them for the opening day, which hosts some of the world's best horses and jockeys. Charles and Camilla are expected to make an appearance during the 5-day event in Berkshire.
Now, stay with us. We're speaking to the Work and Pension Secretary, Mel Stride, in just a few moments. He wants to talk about a brand new disability payment being rolled out today, but we also want to find out how he voted last night on Boris Johnson. Stay with us for that.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Just a bit on the submersible, which has gone missing whilst exploring the wreck of the Titanic. John says, an interesting point. I can't believe it doesn't have a cable attached to it so that with any danger, they can pull it up.
So simple, but so...
But I'm sure that has been thought about. It probably would tie or catch in something else when you think of it. It's so far down.
Yeah.
You know, rocks and vegetation there, goodness knows what. But yeah, I sort of think that you would want, but we all do simple things. That's like saying, I suppose, if you go up in a hot air balloon, it should have a cable so that you could yank it back down if anything went wrong.
Yeah,
or
we all take risks. We go in aeroplanes. We do all sorts of wild things, don't we?
Yeah.
We understand that, I mean, there's 5 on board, one of them being this British billionaire, and we understand a father and son amongst the others on board. Apparently that's not been confirmed. Forgive me, it's just being discussed. I apologise. Right, we're going to talk now all things politics. We are joined by Mel Stride, who is Secretary of State for Work and Pensions. Good morning to you. Oh dear. Well, we will be talking about Miss England, whether bikinis should be coming back as part of all of that. Good morning, sir. Forgive us rushing through that.
He's not wearing a bikini or a swimsuit, as far as I can tell.
I don't know what happened there.
Listen, were you in the Commons last night for the vote?
Good morning.
Morning.
I was in my department working very hard. In the end, I abstained, and perhaps I could just explain why I did that. So I took the report very seriously. I studied it very seriously. I was very content that the inquiry had been carried out with great integrity and great diligence. I agreed with the conclusions reached in terms of wrongdoing on the part of Boris Johnson, but I was distinctly uncomfortable with the harshness of the sanction. I think a sanction of 90 days, which, to put that into context, is 9 times the threshold of 10 days required in order for there potentially to be a recall petition for a sitting MP, was just too far out there for me to vote for the motion. But I certainly wouldn't have voted against, but in the end, on the back, I went for abstention.
Yeah, except the 90 days was symbolic, wasn't it? I mean, it's irrelevant because he was never coming back, and it was a sanction against the undermining of a parliamentary process that he had set about doing.
I don't think the level of the sanction is purely symbolic. I think it's very meaningful in at least 2 ways. One is, I think it should reflect the severity of what has happened. But secondly, it also sets a precedent for what might happen in future, where individuals are perhaps subject to an inquiry by the Privileges Committee. And as I say, I just thought that to go from a very high bar that is a 10-day sanction, which could lead to a sitting MP losing their seat, to actually ending up at 90 days, for me, was just too far. But as I say, in terms of the substance of the report on whether Boris Johnson willfully misled Parliament and his reaction to the committee during the parliamentary inquiry process and so on, I did agree with their conclusions, and I think they came to the right conclusions.
Yes, so you disagreed with your cabinet colleague Gillian Keegan, others like Tom Tugendhat, Penny Mordaunt, and indeed your former boss Theresa May, who stood up in the chamber and made the point that colleagues must hold their own to account. And a lot of people will say by abstaining, effectively you are endorsing lying to Parliament, and perhaps that you are showing weakness, and indeed Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is showing weakness.
No, I think if I'd voted against the motion, I think some of the suggestions you're making there might have greater validity, but I didn't do that. But look, different members of Parliament voted different ways on this, and I think I respect the fact that each one of us, on a free vote, has to sit down and examine the evidence and look at it in the round and balance one thing off against another in our own minds and come to our own conclusions. And I respect colleagues in the Cabinet who came to a different decision to me, but I've explained why it is that I came to the conclusion that I did.
Mr. Stride, so much to talk to you about today, so we'll jump about a bit here. This cost of living payment, which the government is making from today, £150 cost of living payment, over 6 million people will qualify for that. The decisions you guys have to make, you know, yesterday and today and all this week, you'll have people saying, well, I can't pay my mortgage, help me out on that. But you've got to make that decision. No, we'll not help you out in that, but we will help these disabled people. Could you just explain to people what the extra cost is being disabled during this cost of living crisis?
Well, we recognise that with high inflation, where we are not unique in that respect, there are a number of countries that have very high inflation. In fact, when it comes to food inflation, countries like Germany and Sweden and Portugal have food inflation running at over 20%. So we are not unique. But we do recognise the pressures that brings. So the payment of £150, it will be for 6 million disabled people, and it will go out between now and July the 4th. People don't need to apply. It will automatically go into their bank account where they're qualifying for certain benefits such as personal independence payments and disability living allowance and various other benefits. But look, this is part of a much broader package of support that we're putting out there. 8 million low-income households are going to receive £900 across the course of this year. Pensioners, £300 along with the winter fuel payment. We've obviously had the energy price guarantee using windfall taxes on energy companies to, on average, halve the level of energy bills over the last year. We put the national living wage up by 9.7% as of this April. So a number of measures particularly targeted at those lower income households who will be struggling the hardest.
And what about those perhaps middle-income households, many of whom will be remortgaging, some of whom will be looking at 6% for 2-year fix now? An eye-watering figure. I remember Rishi Sunak quoting that figure during his leadership campaign as being a terrible place to be. And here we are, a year from an election, and that's exactly the situation we're in. These are people that should be voting Conservative. This has got to be a big concern for your party.
Well, it is generally a big concern. Of course it is, because we don't want people having to struggle in those circumstances. Just as though we are not unique in having high inflation in our country, we're also unfortunately not unique in having rising interest rates, because that's the monetary response that quite rightly the Bank of England is adopting to bring inflation down. The most important thing we can do now is to bring inflation down, and I'm confident that the Prime Minister's objective of halving inflation by the end of this year will be met. Now, if we can meet that, of course, what that will do is take pressure off interest rates, because inflation will be coming in a downward direction, as well as relieving those kind of cost of living pressures that are associated with inflation itself. So that's got to be our core mission, a really sound fiscal policy alongside the efforts of the Bank of England to bring inflation down.
This awful situation of the submarine gone missing whilst exploring the wreck of the Titanic, is there any practical help we as a government can offer?
Well, I mean, this, as you say, is just the most awful circumstance. We don't know whether this vessel is submerged or floating on the surface. The first thing that the US authorities in particular, who are leading the search here, because of course it's closer geographically to them, far closer than it is to us, is to try and locate this vessel. And of course, unfortunately, the clock is ticking, because as I understand it, the oxygen supplies on that vessel will only last for around 4 days. So time is very tight. But this is just an awful, awful situation. Our thoughts are with those who are caught in this terrible situation, and our hope is that the US authorities and others will be able to locate this vessel quickly, and obviously those people can be brought to safety. But a terrible, terrible circumstance.
Stride, Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, thanks for your time this morning.
Thank you very much. Right, it's coming up to 7:30. Manchester City star Jack Grealish makes fans' dreams come true. Norman Baker and Davinia Taylor are here to take you through the Tuesday newspapers and tell you why. GB News, you're watching and listening to Britain's News Channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m. Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nice to see you again. 7:33 is the time. Front pages look like this.
Here's the Telegraph. It's referring to the British billionaire Hamish Harding. He's one of 5 still missing on the submersible bound for the Titanic wreck.
The Mail says the air is running out of the submarine as the search continues. It's about 13,000 feet below the surface of the Atlantic.
The Times believes Boris Johnson wants a ceasefire with Rishi Sunak. That's after MPs backed the findings of the Downing Street parties scandal.
And the Metro says, hold on to your hats as they capture a photograph of the Princess of Wales. This was yesterday. Spotted headpiece dress during the Order of the Garter ceremony and once again looking immaculate. You wouldn't fault that, would you?
No, very My Fair Lady.
Very My Fair Lady.
Let's go inside the papers this morning with the former Lib Dem minister, Norman Baker, as well as the actress and commentator, wellness guru, Davinia Taylor. Norman, we'll start with you. We were just talking to Mel Stride about mortgage rates and... you know, it's a problem for the Tories, but it's a problem for everybody, you know, and people are feeling really squeezed, and at least a quarter of people's salaries being spent now on their mortgages.
Yes, 1.6 million people will be coming off their fixed-term mortgage by the end of the year, and we're now seeing a rate of 6%, which is a huge increase for people who've been budgeting for much less. And I think part of the problem here has been that rates have been historically quite low for quite a long time, and suddenly they're rising, and people aren't used to that, and they haven't budgeted for it. And of course, as we know, budgets are very tight with the cost of energy and the cost of food going up 20% in supermarkets. So this is a hammer blow, and I think it's very dangerous for the Conservatives because after Liz Truss's chaotic time as Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak's message was that here we are, we're back to stability, we're back to normal economics. Well, if you can't keep interest rates down, then people will conclude that he's failed on that front, and that will affect his result at the general election.
When you look at this poisonous cocktail, the price of property would go up, but you were insured against it because what you were paying to borrow your money was relatively low.
That's right.
So I suppose if you go back 25 years or so, the price of the property was much less, but your interest rate was much higher.
That's right. It's also, by the way, it's not a mortgage point, but it's also the fact that rents are rising up enormously in London and in Glasgow and Edinburgh and the major cities, as landlords are having to find more money themselves, and they're putting the bill on the tenants.
You know, I don't think this is just like an inconvenience or we're going to have to tighten our belts or whatever. I really do think this will lead to a lot of homelessness as a result, and a lot of people just going completely bankrupt.
I'm afraid that's right. People have got very little in the way of savings, or quite a lot of people have got very little in the way of savings. They've got nothing to fall back on, and they're going to default. And I think when we start seeing people evicted from their houses because they can't pay their mortgage, then that's going to have really a political consequence, as well as a social one, of course.
Yeah, it's like the opposite of social mobility happening at the moment. People perhaps living in the sort of home that they grew up in, but being dragged into these higher tax brackets, teachers, nurses, whoever it might be, because of the situation, simply then, with mortgages going up, unable to afford what seemed to be totally normal when they were growing up.
Yes, I think the figure was 40% of people will end up in the higher tax bracket, which is historically hugely high.
But how did we afford it in the 90s? How did we afford it, the higher rates?
I think we didn't have other things we now we take for granted, like mobile phones. People got billed for that, or they get Sky on the television, whatever it happens to be. Expensive holidays. These things didn't happen in the past, and people have now got used to them.
Yeah, you're right there.
Well, antidepressants, I'm not surprised they're on the rise with all this going on. What's the story here?
OK, so 2 million patients have been on antidepressants for 5 years, despite limited evidence of the benefits of the long-term use. I've been on antidepressants. I had my first child 16 years ago, and I had postnatal depression because I had IVF. Now, at no point was my sort of estrogen tested. I was just put on antidepressants, and it was only because I moved house that I changed the kids' doctors. And when I was registering with the new doctor, he said, well, let's have a look at your records. He went, oh, gosh, that's high. What's happened here? Told him my story, and he said, let's get you off them. And it was only because I moved house and changed doctor that he pulled me off them. Because the side effects that I felt, I put on 4 stone. I felt very sluggish, is the word. And the word, actually, the term is anhedonia. It's kind of like an indifference to life. So you're not depressed, but you're not happy. You're just like, meh.
Better.
No, I came off them, and then because I felt my brain was just flatline. That's how I felt on them. So I think I had the wrong medication because it was something to do with my estrogen dropping after IVF, number one. But it was just like a sort of plaster over. I mean, I wasn't suicidal or anything. I just couldn't articulate that I felt flat, and I was put on antidepressants. And a lot of women hitting their menopause, perimenopause, get put on antidepressants. And it's actually it's hormones. It's fluctuating hormones. And people don't know the long-term effects. It's meant to be a sort of like maybe about a year maximum. But people are on it for 5 years, and we don't know. I mean, it's affecting cardiovascular health, heart attack increases. So it's a very dangerous, very strong drug that impacts the liver as well. So the downstream effects could be quite phenomenal.
And I suppose the sort of vicious circle of being depressed, going on to the meds, putting on 4 stone and then being depressed about that.
Yeah, and when you try and come off them, it's called the rebound effect. So the anxiety comes up because you're dependent on them, you're addicted to them. You're not getting high or happy. It's just when you come off them, you feel ferociously scared. And that is the rebound effect, which is very dangerous.
What is it about Western society that means we've lost our joy so much? You know, if you go to countries where there is real poverty, you know, it's really stark. You travel through Africa, you go to, you know, Southeast Asia, wherever it might be, children with no shoes, carrying their water for miles, full of smiles, seem to have that joy that Western society seems to have lost. And our children are all unhappy, and I don't know where we've gone wrong and what's behind it, but we need to ask ourselves not just about why, you know, what we should do instead of antidepressants, but why we're all unhappy. Why are we all so miserable?
I mean, I think there's a huge disconnect between us as a society and playing outside and, you know, kids on phones and things. I think that is setting them up for failure because it's constant spiking of dopamine, which is just makes them feeling very flat afterwards, you know. So you need to get outside, literally barefoot, in contact with the earth. I know it sounds woo-woo, but we are electrical creatures and we need to charge ourselves up.
Well, now, talking about kids hooked on phones, Norman's got a story. You've got a story in the Telegraph here about Generation Z, which we think is from the year 2000 onwards.
Yes, I hope so. That's my understanding. This actually ties in with the submersible story in a sense. It's about an undersea story, which was that the Royal Navy is having difficulty recruiting submarine crew and from Generation Z, from young people. And the reason is because they can't keep in contact with their friends through Snapchat and mobile phones and Instagram and everything else. Doesn't work undersea, as we've heard from the submersible, and they don't want to go through a long period of time without having that contact. And because
they also don't want to give their positions away in any...
Well, that's also true from a defence point of view, yes. But, I mean, in terms of the individual themselves, I mean, for many people, a mobile phone is almost, it seems, a life support machine these days. People don't seem to be able to survive without a mobile phone. You go on a train these days, and where 20 years ago they're reading the papers, now they're all on mobile phones. Actually, not reading the papers, but playing games or talking to their friends or whatever they're doing. There's an example here from somebody who's...
Just to say, you can read the paper on your phone.
You can do it.
I do read the paper on my phone. I don't sit there playing Snake or something.
Well, a lot of people do, I'm afraid.
I know,
but there's an example here from someone who was dumped by their girlfriend, who said, unless you reply to my message, I'll assume you've left me. Well, they're under the water, they can't reply. And apparently it says here that any messages from family members had to be transferred on, quote, very deep, very low frequencies, which carry less data, getting 1 character per second. Well, you can't see very much in 1 second, can you?
Gosh. No, I mean, I'm funny. My phone's broken at the moment, and people are sending me. I can see half of the message, but you do feel really cut off. You are dependent. You're right. You are absolutely dependent on those things. Incidentally, reading the paper on the train, watched a brilliant film at the weekend, which you would like, called Living, starring Bill Nighy. And it's about a commute. Well, part of it's about a commute. The guy finds he has 6 months left to live, but they get on the train every day and they read the paper or whatever. Stylishly, beautifully done. You'll like it. Take it from me.
OK.
OK.
Let's talk about dermatology. This is in the Times 2 supplement, Davinia, and apparently somebody's advocating berries before Botox.
Well, I mean, I appreciate that. I mean, I've had Botox way back in the day before I started running, and it's just a waste of time because you exercise it out. So I don't have Botox, but I know it's a tool for a lot of women to feel a bit more confident. But I think what you put in your body can really increase your collagen production. I have collagen, like bovine collagen, in my coffee every day, so I have about 15 grams of collagen, and it seems to just keep my skin a bit plumper.
Apparently that helps with cellulite as well.
Yes, it does. It's all the amino acids. It's just brilliant for all that fascia. So yeah, it's absolutely great. Not marine collagen, because that's full of sewage and microplastics, but bovine collagen, that's the one, and it helps your gut as well. But there is, I mean, it's so important what you put in your mouth, because if you're having sugar, and I mean carbohydrates like bread, like cereal, granola, that spikes your insulin, and that causes wrinkles. That's the biggest one. Yeah.
But yet, at the same time, eating, I always say there are no wrinkles on a balloon. So I get you. I would be into all the awful stuff that you've had there.
People always say you've had Botox, don't they? And
for God's sake, if I hear somebody else saying to me, always had a bit too much work done. But I have these, when I smile, I get this big fat round face and I get slitty eyes. And people will say, Oh, he's had
too much work done.
And I've got these big natural fat cheeks.
Cheekbones, darling. Yeah. Cheekbones. People pay a fortune for that.
But it is interesting that you say that sugary stuff causes wrinkles. I find it to be quite the opposite. But there you go. That's each to their own. Let's talk about Jack Grealish. The thing about Jack Grealish is that he was being castigated for his drinking last week, Norman. But this lad seems to have a personality and seems to do good.
This is a lovely story, which I'm really pleased to be able to talk about today, which is this young visually impaired football fan called Ralph Molyneux, who's 10 years old. He's almost blind. He's got no sight in his right eye and 50% in his left eye, which is a bit of a challenge for him, and no peripheral vision. He wrote to Jack Grealish to say, he was a fan, and Jack Grealish actually wrote back to him in Braille, which I think is a lovely story. He's taken the trouble to do that, and made the kids' day, really. And I think some of our footballers, you think about Marcus Rashford and his campaign on free school meals and things. I mean, they really are kind of real role models for people these days.
I think Jack Grealish has got a special gift with children with disabilities as well. His sister's got cerebral palsy.
That's right, yeah.
And I think that does make you a special kind of person if you grow up with that. He just has a huge heart. I've got a lot of time for Jack Grealish. I think it's great.
Yeah, it does put... Not everybody's the same. I mean, some people get very involved in writing letters and forming connections, and then it's expected. There's a big pressure on a personality to keep in touch and do things like that. Especially, that lad will not be the only person that writes to him. And after this, there will be lots and lots and lots of people writing to him. So fair play.
Well, I mean, if you talk to someone like Paul McCartney, he'll tell you this huge volume of material he's had all his life of people writing into him, and you can't reply to everything, I don't think. And I think talking about the Beatles, Ringo Starr said when he got to about 75, he was not going to reply to anything anymore. Can't blame him in a way.
I've been teasing this nap story. We will do it with you guys. We're going to do it after 8:30, but we've actually got a nap expert that we've got to get to now. So we'll say goodbye to Norman.
Just your views on naps. Are you a nap fan?
Yeah, I think they're really restorative because the brain needs to sort of
do you not
detox.
Find, no matter what you want, other people judge you? For instance, your phone doesn't stop ringing because you've had a nap. The kids don't stop wanting things because you've had a nap. There may be other demands.
You have more resilience for those stresses, so you approach the problems with a little bit more ease and less bad temper in my case, because I'm ferocious. If I don't have my nap, I'm ferocious like a toddler.
What's your view on naps, Norman?
Oh, sorry. My view on naps.
Nodding off.
Yes. No, they're a very, very essential part of life.
Okay. Right, well, we're going to talk about them after we bring you up to date. The news stories, the latest news. MPs have voted to approve the report which found Boris Johnson deliberately misled Parliament over lockdown parties. The vote was 354 to 7. That's a majority of 374. The Lib Democrats have accused the Prime Minister of being too weak to even turn up to the actual vote.
A British man's believed to be one of the 5 people on board a submarine that's gone missing in the North Atlantic on its way to the Titanic wreckage. Captain Hamish Harding, a pilot who owns his own aviation company, wrote on social media saying he'd be taking part in the dive yesterday due to a break in the weather. The Coast Guard lost contact with the vessel around an hour and 45 minutes into the dive.
Trading Standards warns that large quantities of restricted chemicals have been found in toys sold in the UK. It found a bow and arrow containing 100 times the legal limit and a fashion doll to contain 300 times that limit. It warns parents to buy toys and games from a reputable store and avoid overseas sellers and online marketplaces. Talk about naps. We go to Dr. Sophie Bostock on this. And Dr. Bostock, you are a sleep scientist. And are you for or against napping?
Ooh, it depends who you are, how old you are, how much sleep you've had overnight. In general, short naps, I am a big fan.
OK, tell us about this new study, because it seems to show that over a certain age, having up to 30 minutes of sleep can help your brain from ageing up to 6.5 years.
This is a really interesting study because napping is a bit controversial. There are some studies which suggest that regular habitual napping, particularly when we approach retirement age, is actually linked to increased risks of stroke, heart disease, diabetes. It doesn't sound great, but as I said, it's controversial. In this particular study, they took over 380,000 UK adults and they looked at the genes which predispose people to be either nappers or non-nappers. And they found that those people who had a genetic predisposition for regular napping actually had a larger brain volume overall, which is one of our kind of indicators of brain health. But they also looked at reaction time and visual memory, and they didn't find any links with those. But it does seem to suggest a clue that for some people at least, regular napping might be protective for the brain.
This is like boiling an egg and getting it absolutely right. Not too little, not too much, just the right time. See, what I can't do, and I don't know if other people feel like this, sometimes I feel worse after a very short nap. And I mean, if you're recommending 10 minutes, that would just irritate me. I would just be getting into it and then I have to wake up. So I don't think I'd be a better person after 10 minutes.
No, and the danger is if you have too long a nap, you wake up in the middle of a sleep cycle and then you've actually sort of really disturbed your deep brain processes. Tell us more.
You're absolutely right. We sleep in cycles of progressively deeper and then lighter sleep. So for most people, if you nap regularly, and you can think of napping like a skill, you kind of can get into it sometimes. There's one study that compared 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, and 30 minutes. And it actually found that for short-term alertness, 10 minutes was actually the most efficient because you stay in those lighter stages of sleep, sort of stage 1, stage 2, without getting into deep, slow wave sleep. But if you're very tired, if you really can't get your recommended 7 or more hours of sleep overnight, you might actually find that a longer nap is more restorative, because if you sleep for over an hour, you're going to get some of that deep, slow wave sleep, maybe a little bit of REM sleep, which is really good for creativity. So it depends what you need your nap for. For most of us, if we just need like pepping up mid-afternoon, we have this natural slump between about 1 and 3. And if you can sort of set an alarm for maybe 20 minutes, it'll take you a few minutes to doze off and then a quick nap. You should hopefully wake up feeling more alert, improve your mood, and maybe even improve your working memory, so your capacity to learn for the next couple of hours.
You just mentioned something that just gives me the heebie-jeebies, and that is an alarm bell. So much so am I allergic to alarm calls that I change the ringtone and think this will be a nicer ringtone to wake up to than that. Do you not find that they're quite scary? And
I wake up with almost a heart attack every day, and I feel rage when the alarm goes off. And then as soon as I'm up, I'm fine.
Well, let's find out. Davinia, what's your view of what you're hearing so far?
Well, I was wanted to ask the doctor what she thought about the nappuccino. So you have a shot of coffee, like an espresso, and then you have a little nap for like 10, 15 minutes. What's the sort of outcome from that? Because a lot of people are reporting they become so much more alert. It sets them up for the rest of the afternoon. And, you know, should we be having like siestas? Do you remember back in the 80s when you went to Spain, everything closed for a siesta?
Still does, yeah.
Well, I mean, but they don't seem to sleep. They just go and have a long lunch, don't they?
Oh, right.
But I wanted to know the doctor's opinion on that.
I think there's definitely a benefit in taking some rest during the day. I mean, you were talking earlier about, you know, rise in antidepressants. A lot of us are just permanently on all day long. And actually the concept of stopping, slowing down during the day, giving your body to recover, giving your body a chance to recover, whether that's through a nap or just gentle resting, taking a gentle walk, these are all things that are going to lower your stress levels, lower your blood pressure, give your body and brain a chance to recover. The nappuccino is a great one. So typically caffeine takes about 20 to 30 minutes to actually have an alerting effect. So if you have a small, I would say maybe a single espresso or a small cup of instant coffee, for most people, it will take 20 minutes to make you feel more alert. So that quick bit of caffeine and then a nap may work. For some people, it wakes them up too much and then they can't fall asleep. So it's one of these, suck it and see, give it a try, see if it works for you.
Norman, would 10 minutes work for you? Could you go for 10 minutes and then be back in business after
yes,
that?
I think I do quite regularly, because particularly on a train, the nice movement of a train, which is like gentle rolling, perhaps like inside your mum's womb, who knows. Anyway, 10 minutes nap on a train's brilliant.
Yeah.
And I always wake up just before my station, which is brilliant as well.
Oh, yeah, that's a dangerous game to play. Nap roulette.
There we are.
Norman, Davinia, thank you.
Our alarm goes off now.
Yeah.
That's the end of you guys. Thank you very much. The guys will be back in 40 minutes' time.
Sophie Bostock, thanks very much indeed. Here's your forecast with Aidan McGibbon.
Hello, a very good morning to you. It's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. It's a wet start in the south today, not all of the south, but some areas are seeing heavy rain. That rain moves north through the morning and into the afternoon, associated with a weather system that's coming out of the continent. And some instability in the atmosphere will lead to a few rumbles of thunder, along with some very wet weather for a short space of time. But it's a short space of time. It quickly moves into the central part of the UK before arriving into northern England by the end of the morning and eventually southern Scotland. In its wake, skies do brighten in the south, but quickly further showers develop. Hit and miss downpours for western Scotland, Northern Ireland, southern and eastern parts of England, and some thunderstorms around as well, even some hail. And fairly heavy rainfall in a short space of time, particularly around eastern England, if temperatures get to the mid to even high 20s, which is possible given some sunny skies this afternoon. Then any showers ease away into the evening. The main area of rainfall clears eastern Scotland, pushing into Shetland during the early hours of Wednesday. With clear skies across much of the country, you'd think it would be a cool night, and it will be cooler for parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, as well as Northern England, for example, but still temperatures in the teens by and large across the country, and in some places holding up at 16 or 17 degrees. But plenty of sunshine first thing tomorrow, especially in the east. I think further west, the cloud will quickly build, and showers already across western Scotland, northern England and Northern Ireland will move and develop widely across the rest of the UK by the afternoon. Again, a few rumbles of thunder associated with the heaviest downpours, but it's a warm afternoon with temperatures widely low to mid-20s and in some spots 28 or 29 degrees. It turns even hotter later this week as sunnier weather returns to the south, although it will stay changeable across Scotland and Northern Ireland with some wet weather at times.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching. Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
A race against time. 5 people remain trapped 13,000 feet below the Atlantic Ocean.
Good morning, welcome to our programme. It is 8 o'clock on Tuesday, the 20th of June. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn Holmes and Isabel Webster.
And leading our news on this Tuesday morning, a mission to save a Titanic tourist sub continues this morning. One of the passengers on board includes British billionaire Hamish Harding. It's thought the sub has enough oxygen to last just until Thursday.
We were notified by the operator of the submersible vessel that it was overdue, and it had 5 persons on board the submersible.
A ban for Boris. The former PM loses his parliamentary pass after MPs back the report that he deliberately misled Parliament over lockdown parties by 354 votes to 7.
More than 6 million disabled people will receive a £150 cost of living payment from today. The Work and Pensions Secretary Mel Stride says it's intended to help the most vulnerable households.
It will go out between now and July the 4th. People don't need to apply. It will automatically go into their bank accounts where they're qualifying for certain benefits. So a number of measures particularly targeted at those lower income households who will be struggling the hardest.
Bring back the bikini round as Miss England organisers discuss reinstating the swimwear element of the competition. So we're asking this morning, is it a celebration of women's bodies or is it degrading to those taking part? You asking my opinion? I don't really know. Yeah, I'm not sure I'm a fan. Yeah, I'm not sure I'm a fan.
I'm sort of with you. I mean, I suppose it's up to the individuals.
I just don't see the point. Why are we assessing what they look like in a bikini? Let's do
But
something
I would
useful.
say that most women I know are uncomfortable in a bikini. As in uncomfortable, as in people looking at them in it, because it's like walking around in your underwear, really, isn't it? That's the thing.
We're also going to be getting a
Not
full
that there's
forecast.
anything wrong with walking around in your underwear, I'm just saying.
Will you ponder on that?
Depends what the underwear looks
If
like.
people are wandering around in their underwear, they're going to get very damp today. Apparently it is torrential, certainly in London at the moment. Could we see a return of the sunshine, though?
Another day of downpours for many of us today, but it turns drier, sunnier and warmer in the south later this week. How high will temperatures go? I'll have the forecast in a bit.
We're getting lots of testaments around the country that it is very wet out there, isn't it?
Yeah, Tom Harwood standing by to talk to us in a moment. Apparently it looks like a monsoon.
Just
So
keep
make sure you pack your brolly.
Keep them waiting. That'll be fine. Keep waiting, that'll be funnier.
Tom.
Nothing funny at all about this top story this morning. This will make you feel claustrophobic even just talking about this one. This is a small mini sub, it's a tourist vessel. It was en route to the Titanic shipwreck in the middle. We're talking about in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean and deep deep down.
And British billionaire Hamish Harding, who's chairman of private plane firm Action Aviation, is understood to be one of the 5 on board the OceanGate Expeditions vessel, which was reported missing on Sunday, about an hour and a half into their mission, 435 miles south of Newfoundland.
During a press conference, Rear Admiral John W. Mauger of the US Coast Guard said they're doing everything they can to find this mini-sub.
We're working very closely at this point to make sure that we're doing everything that we can do to locate the submersible and rescue those on board. The location of the search is approximately 900 miles east of Cape Cod in a water depth of roughly 13,000 feet. It is a remote area. And it is a challenge to conduct a search in that remote area.
A challenge is one word for it. Well, earlier we spoke to Dr. Simon Boxall. He's an oceanographer from the University of Southampton, and he said the situation is critical.
They're in a very difficult situation here. They're sitting in 4 kilometres, 13,000 feet of water. That's the limit of the sub's capability anyway. They're in a very deep part of the ocean. They're a long way from the coast as well, so getting any sort of rescue attempt to them is going to take time. And there are very few vessels that are capable of going to those sorts of depths. The other problem is there's no easy communication method for that sort of depth. You cannot communicate with things like radios and things underwater. They're reliant on a series of sort of sonic clicks, and that's assuming that the receiver they have on the submarine is actually working. They've not heard anything from the submarine. It's all very quiet. As you said, time is getting short. They have enough oxygen to last them until Thursday.
And of course, we know obviously how long it took for us to discover Titanic, and the size compared to the submersible significant gives you an idea of how difficult this search is going to be. Tell us a little bit about what the ocean floor is like there, because it's my understanding that lots of deep trenches that the submersible could be hiding in, and it would be very, very difficult to, as you say, not only find it but then recover it.
Well, we know how difficult it's been, impossible so far, to find MH370. That was sort of an intensive 1 year of searching. Now, we do know this location of this submarine more accurately than we did of MH370, which was lost in the Indian Ocean 5 or 6 years ago. So, we do know roughly where the submarine should be, but it's still looking at a very large area. And the submarine is mainly built of carbon fiber, which means that it doesn't have a particularly good magnetic signature. It's very difficult to find. The technology we need to find it is not necessarily on hand. So it's a question of getting that technology out there. They're beyond the reach of helicopters and things, so they are waiting for surface ships really to get to them to support them out there in their search.
Well, Doctor, that search, we know there are no communications. Communications have been lost. But the sub itself, it could be underwater. It could be on the surface, though, couldn't it?
If it was on the surface, they would have other communication. If they're on the surface, they would be able to use radios. And I'm assuming they have some form of radio communication for surface use. But if once it's below the surface, it could be at any depth. It could be 10 meters beneath the surface. It could be on 4 kilometers, 13,000 feet. So once it's below the surface, they will lose all radio communication. Now, also, the sub itself is sealed from the outside. They wouldn't be able to escape at those depths anyway. So this idea that they could sort of open a hatch and escape at 4 kilometers, you'd be crushed. And to be honest with you, at most depths, you'd be crushed. So unless they are very close to the surface, then they have a problem. If they're on the surface, there could be communication.
Lots of focus naturally on the British-born billionaire who's on board, Hamish Harding, and I understand he has a Guinness World Record for the longest duration at the bottom of the sea in the Mariana Trench, and I think he was down on the bottom of the floor for 4 hours and 15 minutes, so he's already exceeded his own record. What are the impacts on the human body if you are at these sorts of depths for prolonged periods? Because obviously there are issues when you come back up, but could they, if they were found, be okay at those sorts of depths for a long time?
keep in mind that they're in a sort of a sealed submarine. So the pressure they're at is still going to be close to atmospheric pressure. So it's a bit like on an aircraft. You go in an aircraft, you are at slightly lower pressure than you would normally be. But when you land again, you haven't gone from a vacuum to sort of full atmospheric pressure. It's the same with one of these subs. You're at sort of atmospheric pressure in the submarine. So once you're at the surface, it's fine. You're looking at very, very small increase in pressure. So it's not like a diver coming up from, say, 50, 60 meters and then have to worry seriously about the bends. That's not the case in this case. They are at atmospheric pressure.
Well, we're also getting reports now in the last few moments that one of those on board is one of Pakistan's richest men, but he also happens to be on board the Prince's Trust charity here in the UK, of course, a British-based charity. And we understand his teenage son, one of those 5. So among them, British billionaire Hamish Harding and indeed one of Pakistan's richest men, Shahzada Dawood, and his son Solomon. Our thoughts, of course, with all of those involved and that ongoing rescue operation. We'll keep a close eye on any progress with that for you. Now, it's high drama in the Commons last night. MPs voted overwhelmingly to back a damning report that found Boris Johnson lied to Parliament about Partygate. Only 7 MPs voted against the Privileges Committee findings in a humiliating defeat, which means now the former Prime Minister's parliamentary pass will be revoked. Well, earlier, the Work and Pensions Secretary, Mel Stride, said the correct decision was made, but he felt uncomfortable about the 90-day sanction.
I agreed with the conclusions reached in terms of wrongdoing on the part of Boris Johnson, but I was distinctly uncomfortable with the harshness of the sanction. I think a sanction of 90 days, which, to put that into context, is 9 times the threshold of 10 days required in order for there potentially to be a recall petition for a sitting MP, was just too far out there for me to vote for the motion. But I certainly wouldn't have voted against, but in the end, on the back, I went for abstention.
Well, that was Mel Stride earlier. Let's cross to Westminster and get the take on all of this from our Deputy Political Editor, Tom Harwood, who's withstanding torrential rain, I think, for us this morning. Tom, high drama last night, a very small showing in the former Prime Minister's defence, although in his defence, he did call off the dog somewhat, didn't he?
He did indeed. I spent most of yesterday evening talking to Conservative MPs just the other side of this wall over here. It was the Conservative Home summer party, and that was a convenient excuse for many MPs to avoid walking the 5 or so minutes to the Commons chamber to walk through those division lobbies. Most Conservative MPs deciding to stay away, and some expecting that a division would not be called, because if no one expresses dissent in the chamber, it can go through on a nod. That would have been the preferred outcome for Boris Johnson. However, a division was forced by none other than the Labour chief whip, Alan Campbell, who shouted 3 times very loudly when the division was being called, "No, no, no," forcing that vote instead of just allowing it to go through on a nod so that names could be counted. And names indeed were counted, a pretty sizable number of names voting in favour of this sanction, which means that now Boris Johnson will be forbidden from applying for a former member's pass. Now, he'll still be able to access the parliamentary estate as a former MP, but only sort of as a normal member of the public may access the parliamentary estate. He'll have to be escorted by a pass holder if he wants to enter the Palace of Westminster. Now, it's not exactly the harshest sanction in the world. Of course, he's already resigned as an MP, so the 90-day sanction is a bit academic. The question of this former member's pass, can anyone really imagine Boris Johnson walking into Westminster and just sort of sitting down for a quiet cup of tea? I'm not quite sure that someone of his celebrity would be making full use of that former member's pass were he to have applied for one. So potentially yesterday was a big day of symbolism more than anything else in the House of Commons.
OK, Tom Harwood, with that, thanks very much indeed. Now, at 10 a.m. this morning, Valdo Calocane, the man arrested on suspicion of murdering Barnaby Webber, Grace O'Malley Kumar and Ian Coates in Nottingham, will make his first Crown Court appearance.
It's been a week since the attacks happened. We go now to our East Midlands reporter, Will Hollis, to give us a run-through of what will happen today. Will.
Good morning. Yes, well, you'll be able to see in the background people going on their way to work, people going on their way to school, and you might see from time to time them stopping and having a read of some of the notes that are written on the floral tributes outside of the council house here in Old Market Square. And you'll also be able to see in the background the helium balloons that have been placed there are still floating, which gives you an indication of just how fresh these attacks are. And it was about this time last week, about 8 o'clock, when people were trying to get into the city centre, that we had a good indication that something had gone wrong here in Nottingham. And as that day progressed, when people were suspended from using the tram or spent time stuck in traffic and finally arrived in the city, they were greeted with cordons, police cordons, across a square mile of the city. And then police said that 3 people had been killed. Of course, we now know that those 3 people are the 2 19-year-old students, Grace O'Malley Kumar and Barnaby Webber, who were simply on their way home from a night out, as well as 65-year-old Ian Coates, who was doing the other journey. He was on the way into work. And now we know that a 31-year-old man, Valdo Calocane, has been charged with their 3 murders, as well as 3 counts of attempted murder in relation to the alleged knife and van attacks that took place here in Nottingham. He's expected at Nottingham Crown Court today at 10 a.m. for a short hearing. It could still be quite some time till we see a trial for Mr. Calocane. But even if that trial is a little way away, you can just see from how people are behaving here in Nottingham, still taking their time, still thinking about what happened in this awful tragedy 1 week ago in Nottingham, with the attack still very fresh in their minds, but also still very fresh in their hearts.
Thanks, Will. Appreciate it. 16 minutes past the hour of 8 o'clock. Let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's stories.
Over 6 million people with disabilities will receive a one-off £150 cost of living payment from today. Those who are eligible receive the payment automatically. Earlier, the Work and Pension Secretary Mel Stride told us that this is part of a much wider support initiative.
We recognise the pressures that brings. So the payment of £150, it will be for 6 million disabled people, and it will go out between now and July the 4th. People don't need to apply. It will automatically go into their bank accounts where they're qualifying for certain benefits such as personal independence payments and disability living allowance and various other benefits. But look, this is part of a much broader package.
Meanwhile, the Housing Secretary says Britain faces an urgent need to build more homes as the population grows. Michael Gove said that house building could not be looked at purely in numbers, but was instead about creating homes and settlements for the future, whatever that means.
New research suggests taking regular daytime naps could be good for brain health. It could slow the rate at which the brain shrinks as we age, according to research carried out by UCL. The study suggests the average difference in brain volume between people programmed to be habitual nappers and those who are not was equivalent to 2.5 to 6.5 years of brain aging. Lots of views on this, which are quite entertaining.
So Howard says, I'm a courier, and if I'm feeling tired behind the wheel, I pull over, I set my phone alarm for 10 minutes, and he's been charged for that, basically, because if he doesn't work, he doesn't get paid. And I take a nap, then I can drive all day. It's great, it works for me, 10-minute nap.
Paddy in Andover says, I remember the entire British Army taking naps from 1 to 1:45. Everyone's asleep. Is that still the case?
Gosh.
Can anyone testify to that? I don't know if that is still
Richie
the case.
says, during the afternoon, and I woke up feeling rubbish. Yeah, he does during the
That's what I'm like. And Graham says, if you're working on a construction site or in a manufacturing environment, naps don't occur.
That's true.
And I tell you what, if you're tired in those sectors, accidents happen.
But I remember once doing a film
if we fall
report
asleep.
for some employers provide sleep pods.
Yeah, in the city, that's a growing thing, isn't it? And sort of finance, but that's boring work, probably essential. Like another spreadsheet.
And you go into this little peanut thing and you pull the lid down, and the idea is that you go sleep. I mean, I tried it. I could hear a lot of noise about outside. And I also think people are saying, where is he? He's in there sleeping. I think people are judgmental.
Yeah,
when you
of course
sleep.
they would be, yeah.
You think, there's that dozy Isabel. She's always...
Sleepy Joe.
Sleepy Joe.
Sleepy Izzy, it's an insult.
That's all Biden needs, isn't it?
Yeah, a little sleep
Biden
pod.
just needs a
God love
sleep
him.
pod.
On Air Force One.
So next we're going to be asking whether we should, or whether they should, it's nothing to do with us, whether they should bring back a bikini round in the Miss England pageant. Okay, and they're said to be considering this. So do you have a view on that? We've got two people that do have a view for and against after this.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in their home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m. Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wakey, wakey.
That was my power nap.
Oh, sorry.
Have you
Are
ever?
you sleeping again?
Again, yeah, again. But could you ever imagine any job you've ever done, part-time or full-time, that you would be encouraged or allowed to go and have a sleep?
No.
No.
Because you're on the clock. Someone's paying you.
Yeah. And
But actually, it could be an increased productivity as a result.
yeah. But how long
Maybe
does
we
it
need a
take
little
for your
nap
brain
break.
to grow?
Oh, yeah. Well, how regularly do you have to nap
It's
before you
gonna
get...
be 30 years before you get
True.
your brain doesn't shrink
So many questions.
or whatever.
Lots more stuff to come.
My brain's
on the
growing
programme.
all the time.
Is it? I don't think that's
Full of information.
factually true. After the age of 60, it's like, 8:45, somebody's brain, I'm sure, is still switched on. Shadow Secretary for Scotland, Ian Murray, tells us how Labour plans to make Britain a clean energy superpower by 2030.
Plus, after a student chose to identify as a pussycat, we are asking whether classrooms have gone too woke yet. I mean, so the pupil goes meow when you go meow, moo. You say, shut up. Anyway, you can join in any of our discussions today. GBViews at GBNews. No, what would you say? I would say shut up. What would you say?
I'd say if you want to be treated like a cat at all times, then you have to go and catch mice, you have to go and do your toilet business in the next door neighbour's garden, and you have to eat off the floor. End of conversation.
Fair point, OK. The Miss England beauty pageant is considering bringing back a swimwear round 20 years after it was banned, after organisers said they no longer wanted to bow to the woke brigade on all of this. Is it a woke brigade? Is it just good taste? Is it moving with the times or what?
I don't know. Well, I mean, the beauty competition is looking to reintroduce the bikini parade on stage for the first time since 2002, despite other competitions continuing to scrap such rounds. But is ogling women in bikinis still acceptable?
Well, let me introduce you to Miss Great Britain 2020, Jen Atkin, who thinks that the organisers should bring it back as simply a celebration of a woman's form.
Meanwhile, writer Emma Wolfe believes it's demeaning to judge and value women by their bodies. Well, let's start with you, Jen, because it is a controversial position to take that you think, women should be judged and awarded based on, what they look like in a bikini.
I just think we've worked so hard to be able to get to a point where we can make our own decisions as women. And it's so important to celebrate women of all different shapes, all different sizes, and to be able to decide to go into Miss England and think, I want to do a swimwear round, a bikini round, is such an empowering and amazing thing. And we're in 2023. You can't go through any social media. You can't go anywhere without seeing someone in a bikini, in a swimsuit. And if someone's happy being on a stage in a swimsuit, then we should be happy for them. They're not doing anything wrong. And I think
absolutely,
we should just be proud of them.
Yeah, and lots of people will agree with you, Jen, and I know your own personal story is one of tremendous weight loss, having lost, I think, 8 stone or something to go on and win Miss Great Britain. But presumably, you're talking about celebrating all body shapes and sizes. Presumably, you wouldn't have won if you'd have been in your former body. Is that celebrating all shapes and sizes, or is that celebrating you once you're skinny?
So actually, although I have lost 8 stone and I'm very, very proud of that, and I was absolutely so excited to get on a stage in a swimsuit, which I wore a swimsuit, not a bikini. I was very excited, very proud of myself. We have actually had in Miss Great Britain, ladies size 16, size 18, go on and win Miss Great Britain. And it's absolutely amazing because, Miss England and Miss Great Britain are obviously different pageants. I've been in both of them. I personally enjoy a swimwear round. And girls who enter know what they're getting into when you go into a pageant that has a swimwear round. And if they're happy doing it, if they're confident and they want to be on stage in a swimwear, who are we to say that's wrong?
Well, let's see if Emma Wolfe says it's wrong. That's the case for the defence, Emma, and the argument for a swimwear round. What would you say against that?
Look, I completely respect Jen's choices, and she's obviously had an amazing personal story, absolutely. But Jen and many people like her say this is a great chance for body positivity and all of that. But genuinely, can you actually see the average woman in the UK, who, by the way, the average size is size 16, or a plus-size woman winning this round? If you don't think that these women prepare like crazy for these competitions, If you don't think that they diet and starve themselves, if you don't think they work out like mad, if you don't think that they spray tan and wax themselves to within an inch of their lives, then you're wrong. I have a friend in Florida who is a professional swimwear bikini contestant. She said they literally would not eat for 3 days. They would literally be eating ice cubes, working out 3, 4, 5 times a day at the gym. Absolutely, extremely stressful. This is not just about, it's a bikini competition. It's a bit of fun. This is about, and I've written a lot about women, body image, young people's mental health. Okay? Young people right now, we know body dysmorphia, we know eating disorders are spiraling out of control. We know that this is sending a message to young women, but also boys and young men, that the shame and the guilt and the anxiety that they feel around their bodies. Literally, this is absolutely creating an impossible body image perfection, which is just unhelpful in the current climate. There is already enough anxiety and worry and, just a sense of anxiety around their bodies for young people, and it's men too. We don't need this. This is a retrograde step. 20 years on from getting rid of this category, let's send a message that we value and reward and judge women for what they think and what they can do and what they do in the world, rather than how they look in a bikini.
Jen?
I totally disagree with that. I think a point you're trying to say is women should hide their bodies, and I totally think we should be allowed to wear swimwear. It's not the only round in the competition. Miss England actually has a Beauty with a Purpose charity competition. They have a Beauty and Brains competition. There's a talent competition. There's a sports competition. There's so many different elements to Miss England. It's not just judged on swimwear, and I think it's just a fun element of it. Like I said, we've had Miss Great Britains who have been a size 16 to 18 who have gone on and won a swimwear round, and I think it's just a celebration of bodies. Women shouldn't have to hide their bodies, and if they want to get on stage in a swimsuit or a bikini, we should celebrate that and applaud them for it. Nobody should be afraid to be in a swimsuit or a bikini no matter where they are. Apart from in the shops, it's probably not allowed.
Emma, I know that you're a mum. I mean, as a mum myself, I just think of the female body as just incredible in terms of what it actually can achieve in creating life. Is it demeaning to celebrate the female body? Oh, I think we've lost Emma in this. Are you able to hear me there?
I can hear you.
Good. Yes. I was just asking. We create life and hold babies for 9 months. There's nothing wrong with celebrating the female form.
There's nothing wrong with celebrating the female form, Isabel. And I did not use the word hide. Of course, I don't want women to hide their bodies. Absolutely not. But this is talking about the body beautiful. This is promoting perfectionism. This is measuring. Basically, let's be honest. This is measuring a woman's boobs, hips, and bums. This is valuing and judging women based on their bodies in a bikini or in a swimsuit. This is exactly not what you are talking about there, which is the fact that we create life, that we give birth, that we create babies, that we write books, that we have thoughts, that we can be friends, that we can run charities and businesses, that we can win Nobel Prizes, that we can, be scientists. There's so much more to a woman parading up and down bikini or swimsuit, and the mental health aspect of it cannot be overlooked in this current day and age. This is why it was got rid of 20 years ago. We cannot overlook that.
Jen, can I ask you, when you were heavier in the past, did you have issues being bigger, and would you have felt low self-esteem seeing the body beautiful? And do you have anxiety or a bit of a conscience about, the implications of this on people who have low self-esteem?
I mean, obviously, I was a bigger woman when I was younger, but I'm still a size 12 now, and I've competed as a size 12. I've never once dieted for a pageant in my life, and I was lucky enough to go on and win Miss Great Britain. I actually came second in Miss England, and I've never once dieted for it in my life. The reason why I dieted in the past was for health reasons, but I'm still a curvy size 12. Back in the day, I did have more issues with my weight, but if I'd have known about competitions like Miss England and Miss Great Britain, I would have competed in them. And I think unless you've actually been in a pageant or watched one, especially in England, you don't know the ins and outs of it. I understand ones in America, like you were saying, Florida, are completely different. It's a completely different kettle of fish. And I understand what you're saying about mental health and things like that. But I think people are always going to suffer with bad mental health, regardless of pageants happening. There's always going to be different elements for that. But if people want to go and enter pageants and be in a swimwear round in a swimsuit and it makes them happy, I just think it'd just be such a shame to take that experience away from them.
And Jen, would, in your mind, do you think this round will return to the competition? We're debating it here today, but the fact that we are, do you think the mood has changed and that there is an appetite for this?
I think it will change. I think it will be reinstated. But girls who don't want to compete in a swimwear round, there's so many more pageants in the UK that they can enter. There's actually specifically a Miss Swimsuit pageant for girls who want to just be in swimwear. So there's so many different pageants around the UK they can enter. Miss England obviously is one of the top pageants. If girls want to do a swimwear round or are comfortable doing it, they'll still enter, and I think it will be a success.
Thank you, Jen Atkin. She wants the swimwear round in Miss England. Emma Wolf thinks thing of the past, forget it. Thank you both very much indeed. Very interesting listening to both of you. Thank you very much.
Stay with us, as well as letting us know your views. Yeah, you want to chat about it? Yeah.
Talk.
Yeah, go on then.
I used to do an awful lot of those competitions, compare them.
Yeah.
And I have to say, in those days, in the early 80s, I was always very embarrassed by the swimsuit round. It becomes a different competition. So it's different, a woman in an evening dress walking up and down an island telling people what her aspirations are. And then when she comes out in a bikini or a swimsuit, it becomes a different competition. I think for me, I became embarrassed then, and I didn't know, like, well, don't look anywhere you shouldn't look and whatever. But I do think the tone changes because you are oogling. You have to oogle.
Of course, and it's just so superficial. And as Emma said, I have to say, I'm inclined to agree with Emma. There's so much more to a woman than the way she looks, what she's wearing, how she's done her hair. I mean, goodness me, it's just so old-fashioned. Let's.
But Jen, as Jen said, there are different competitions depending on what your view is or how you're suited by this, whatever, as well.
Well, it's not for me, but we'd love to hear what you guys at home
I could
think.
see. I've been asked to go and do swimsuit stuff. Like for me, parading up and down the catwalk, you know, and I think a lot of people
don't want to be objectified.
People would pay to see that, but I don't want to be objectified. You're
exactly, right. Yeah, there's more to you.
So I wouldn't even go on holiday with you and get into my Speedos or anything. No. Why should I be there for your jollies? Why should I? You know?
What a thought.
What a thought. With that.
Can a sign be sexist? As a water company's blasted for displaying a generic men at work sign. We'll talk to Norman Baker and Davinia Taylor about that after this.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle.
Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Read all about it. Here come the paper front pages. And we begin, first of all, with the Mail, saying the air is running out of the Titanic tourist submarine. The search continues 13,000 feet below the surface of the Atlantic Ocean.
The Telegraph referenced the British billionaire Hamish Harding. He's one of the 5 still missing on that submersible bound for the Titanic wreck.
Here's the Eye, leading on the Bank of England experts' prediction that mortgage rates will stay high for another 2 years. That's as new interest rates are due on Thursday this week.
We're going through the papers with the former Lib Dem Minister, Norman Bacon, the actress and wellness guru Davinia Taylor. Norman, shall we start with you? We were teasing the break a moment ago, talking about roadworks and how the signs are now being deemed sexist.
Yes, the Equality Trust, whoever they are, has complained that the signs from South West Water, which say caution men at work, are sexist. They should say something else, presumably people at work. And some might think that keeping water bills down is more of a priority than worrying about what's on signs. More to the point, I don't know if there are any women who dig up trenches. If there are, then I suppose it's a point here, but I don't ever see any.
No, this is true.
All right, women, are you offended by this? It's not for us to judge, it's you guys.
I'm not offended at all.
Mm-hmm.
No,
do you even think about it?
No. Not
offended,
not
don't think about it, and I certainly don't want to be digging up roads.
Yeah, please, dig up the road and get cheaper water, thank you.
Give that man a good
So why can't they be
sandwich.
bothered just doing other things instead of wasting money, wasting time, causing annoyance? Just get the roads dug up and dug down again.
South West Water say we're currently reviewing all of our signage to ensure it aligns with our business values. There you are. That's what they're doing with their time.
Brilliant. Thanks.
Davinia,
yes.
Postmenopausal women, postmenopausal.
Yeah, actually, I think this is about fatty liver disease, which is often associated with alcoholism. But even not just postmenopausal women, you've got kids like age 20 now getting diagnosed with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And this is because of our number one enemy, sugar, and other things like veg oil. It's getting stuck in the liver and causing literally the liver to deteriorate. The good news is liver can restore itself. So as soon as you take these ingredients out your diet, you can repair. But my mantra is count chemicals, not calories. So I don't do any calorie control. I just keep certain ingredients out of my menu and my liver seems to be fine. So I have a very high-fat diet. I don't have a high sugar diet. I have quite low carbohydrate diet because it all converts to sugar, and that is the problem. And there's a lot of people who just have no idea. Just because they don't drink, they think their liver's fine. There are real toxins in our food chain, and it needs to be addressed because children are getting impacted by it. Imagine having to have a liver transplant at the age of 20. I mean...
Yeah, you see, but again, I blame politicians on this. They are influenced, they're lobbied by the food industry, and we are either consuming poisons that we're not being told about, or we're not. And the thing is, we are. I've never drank a drop of alcohol in my life.
Yeah.
I've got fatty liver.
OK.
Which is not really a surprise.
Really good supplement for you that is going head-to-head with a drug called metformin. It's called berberine. It's a herb, and that seems to be really helpful. No side effects, and it pulls the sugar out the liver. And
Really?
Yeah, berberine.
And are you saying metformin does the same?
Yeah, but this metformin has side effects like chronic fatigue and all sorts of things that affect your neurotransmitters. Berberine is a herb, and that seems to be really positive. It's going head-to-head with metformin.
Isn't it nice when you hear someone who, you know...
Has a solution.
A solution.
Yeah,
Not a problem, but a solution. Yeah.
Does Sir Keir Starmer have a solution to the ongoing furore around gongs and the resignation honours?
Very nice link, Isabel, if I may say so.
That's what they paid me for.
Yes, he does, and I want to say he's right, because what he's saying is that there should no longer be these so-called resignation honours lists whereby Prime Ministers who leave office give all their mates peerages and gongs and everything else, which Boris Johnson, of course, had done, as did David Cameron with the chumocracy. And God help us, Liz Truss is going to get a resignation on his list as well, although she was barely Prime Minister for a couple of hours. She'll give her mates some gongs as well. And Starmer has said he will not do that if he becomes Prime Minister when he leaves office. And Tony Blair, actually, who was not one of my great heroes, he had no honours list at the end of his time either.
Was that more because he was dishonoured? I mean, there was sort of...
Well, you could be more dishonoured than Boris Johnson,
No, maybe, yeah.
What are the benefits of getting, like, a peerage? Do you get to the front of the queues at the airport? I mean, what is
well, you might push in, I suppose, but...
Yeah.
Do you have an honour?
No, I'm right honourable because I'm in Privy Council, but I'm not anything else.
You should have an honour, Norman.
Thank you.
And are you called upon to advise as a Privy Councillor?
No.
No.
Theoretically, you can advise the monarch, but...
Did you go along when the Queen died in the aftermath of
I was there.
Charles's ascension to the throne?
I was at the Ascension Council.
Wonderful.
Yes, and it was an interesting experience. And you had all the former Prime Ministers there, you know, from John Major onwards right the way through, who were all standing there in the line. And at that particular point, it fell within a couple of weeks that Liz Truss was Prime Minister. So she actually handled the matter. And I have to say, when you look at what she was doing, and you look at Tony Blair and Gordon Brown and John Major and David Cameron, you think, well, who is this person who's now Prime Minister? You usually think that.
Well, you were asking what the perks were, though, didn't you? You get 350 quid every time you tap in.
In the House of Lords you do, yeah.
Once you're in the Lords. And you don't have to stay any length of time, so you literally tap in and then head out.
Tap out, yeah.
You could go and have a drink in this subsidised bar.
It's contactless, really, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's... And, you know, that's taxpayer subsidised, so it's an absolute boon if you do get a peerage.
As a member of the Order of the British Empire, I am allowed access to the royal enclosure at Royal Ascot. Not only am I allowed access, I mean, you have to buy your ticket and things separately, but you get access to the royal area. But you can bring your mates.
Oh,
yeah,
your plus
that's
one.
you.
There we go. Oh, yes, I'm your mate.
Only there because I've got an OBE.
I'm very lucky. Thank you.
So that's what all I know of. I don't know of anything else.
Nothing
Lots
else.
of perks.
I was just thinking at the airport, really. That's the queue that gets me.
Yes.
But with 4 kids. Can I, you know, please?
Can I, please?
No.
Guys, thank you very much. We have to say goodbye now. Davinia, Norman, thank you. We've got Ian Murray standing by. He's Shadow Secretary of State for Scotland. Good morning to you. Shall we pick up where we were? We were just discussing what unfolded in the Commons last night, very much led by Harriet Harman and the Labour Party. Your views in all of it, first of all?
Well, I think it was very much led by Harriet Harman and the Conservative Majority Privileges Committee report, in fact, in terms of the way in which the debate came about yesterday. But it was pretty clear what had happened in the report. It was pretty clear that the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson had been found guilty of wilfully misleading Parliament and, of course, wilfully misleading the public as a result, and subsequently trying to intimidate the committee to say otherwise. And I think the conclusion of last night is why the current Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, who was the Chancellor under Boris Johnson, didn't feel the need to turn up and to back the report. He promised integrity, accountability and professionalism when he came into being Prime Minister on the steps of Downing Street, and last night was the opportunity for him to prove that they were going to turn the page on the sorry saga of the last 18 months or so, and he decided not to bother. He said he didn't want to influence people. Well, it's his job as Prime Minister to influence people, and he should have influenced his own party to walk down the Yes lobby yesterday, endorse the report and move on.
What about those who say that the sanction was really just a bit heavy-handed, and actually many Conservatives felt that they had to abstain yesterday, even though they entirely endorsed the findings of the report, but they felt it just went too far with that 90-day suspension?
Well, the sanctions are there for a reason, and the sanctions reflect the seriousness of what happened. This is a Prime Minister during a health crisis that has never been seen before, who has been found guilty of willfully lying to Parliament and essentially sticking two fingers up to the public in terms of what they were sacrificing during that COVID crisis. And I think the sanction benefits the crime. And I think the Independent Parliamentary Privileges Committee panel that was set up by the government with a Conservative majority, of course chaired by Harriet Harman, who had said in the Commons yesterday in an intervention from Jacob Rees-Mogg that she would have stood down if she felt the government didn't have confidence in her chairing the committee, and they said they did, has come out with a sanction on an independent basis, and that sanction should have been backed. Anything over 10 days it could have resulted in a recall petition in any case, and what Boris Johnson has done is what he's always done. He's ran away instead of facing the music and taking any sort of responsibility or accountability for his actions.
We were just discussing Sir Keir Starmer saying that if he does ever become Prime Minister, he won't go for the resignation honours list in the same way Boris Johnson has. What do you think about Sean Bailey and the Conservative Party advisor, who were both featured in that leaked video of a party during lockdown and have both been honoured by Boris Johnson? Do you think they should be stripped?
Well, the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, should never have approved the resignation honours list, and Keir's right to say if he's Prime Minister he wouldn't have a resignation honours list. And I understand it, Gordon Brown or Tony Blair as Labour Prime Ministers didn't have a resignation honours list either. It's become a farce where a Prime Minister who leaves office in total disgrace, and the report that we debated yesterday shows it was in total disgrace, gets to put his friends, his cronies, his donors and everyone who's been part of that scandal into the House of Lords. I think the public will be looking upon this with complete and utter disbelief, and the current Prime Minister should never have signed that off and should reverse his decision to send that list of people to the King, because we want people in the House of Lords that can contribute something and have something to be rewarded for, and none of the people on the list that you mentioned deserve a place in the House of Lords and contributing to our public life, because they have shown that their contribution to public life already hasn't been particularly positive.
The Scottish Shadow Secretary, your boss was in Scotland yesterday, Sir Keir, along with the Scottish Labour leader Anwar Sarwar, and he was talking about setting up a proper national champion called Great British Energy. Now, there's a big responsibility with this, because, you know, Scotland, a lot of jobs depend on the oil and gas industry, but here is a vision that you guys have for life after gas and oil. Tell us about that.
Well, this is hugely exciting, and an ambitious and bold plan to make sure that we can decarbonise our entire energy supply by 2030. It's about making the UK a global superpower in green energy and winning that global race. It's about jobs and creating those jobs in a transition from fossil fuels. It's about making sure we can lower people's bills by generating cheaper renewable energy here. It's also about that energy security, which is critical when you look across Europe to Ukraine and what's happened since Russia invaded Ukraine. And it's also about meeting our climate commitments. It's a hugely ambitious proposal, completely backed by the industry. The ambition's been backed by the industry. Of course, there's going to have to be a huge delivery and huge expectations in terms of that delivery, but also there's a real opportunity now to show that a just transition isn't just about words, but is actually about actions, and we can create those hundreds of thousands of new highly skilled, highly paid green jobs in the renewables sector as a transition away from fossil fuels. That is the challenge, that's the ambition, and to set that 2030 target, I think, is something the country desperately needs.
But Ian, this didn't happen when you look at life after the coal mines closed around the country. This seldom happened in Scotland and Wales and in England, where these mines were. Why would you and this plan be any different? What makes you think that you could actually replace one with the other?
Well, the coal mines and the deindustrialisation of Britain was completely and utterly botched by the Thatcher Conservative governments. What this plan is essentially saying is that there's a global race to be a green superpower. America and other countries are winning that race, and indeed Munich and Malaysia have publicly owned energy companies that GB Energy wants to be in. Britain doesn't have any of that. We're losing that global race. The jobs that are being created in the green industries at the moment are all overseas. There's tens of thousands of jobs being created overseas and very few here. What Keir is laying out is an ambitious plan to do four things: create the jobs in this country that will replace the jobs and more of those that are lost through the extraction of fossil fuels, and also to provide cheaper, secure energy and meet our climate targets. I think that's hugely ambitious and incredibly exciting, and I look forward to trying taking that through as Secretary of State for Scotland when we win the next election.
OK, well, good luck to you. Thanks for outlining that to us. Ian Murray is the Shadow Secretary of State for Scotland. Appreciate your time this morning.
Stay with us. We're talking about classrooms and whether they've gone too woke after this.
Hello, a very good morning to you. It's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. It's a wet start in the south today, not all of the south, but some areas are seeing heavy rain. That rain moves north through the morning and into the afternoon, associated with a weather system that's coming out of the continent. And some instability in the atmosphere will lead to a few rumbles of thunder, along with some very wet weather for a short space of time. But it's a short space of time. It quickly moves into the central part of the UK before arriving into northern England by the end of the morning and eventually southern Scotland. In its wake, skies do brighten in the south, but quickly further showers develop. Hit and miss downpours for western Scotland, Northern Ireland, southern and eastern parts of England, and some thunderstorms around as well, even some hail. And fairly heavy rainfall in a short space of time, particularly around eastern England, if temperatures get to the mid to even high 20s, which is possible given some sunny skies this afternoon. Then any showers ease away into the evening. The main area of rainfall clears eastern Scotland, pushing into Shetland during the early hours of Wednesday. With clear skies across much of the country, you'd think it would be a cool night, and it will be cooler for parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, as well as Northern England, for example, but still temperatures in the teens by and large across the country, and in some places holding up at 16 or 17 degrees. But plenty of sunshine first thing tomorrow, especially in the east. I think further west, the cloud will quickly build, and showers already across western Scotland, northern England and Northern Ireland will move and develop widely across the rest of the UK by the afternoon. Again, a few rumbles of thunder associated with the heaviest downpours, but it's a warm afternoon with temperatures widely low to mid-20s and in some spots 28 or 29 degrees. It turns even hotter later this week as sunnier weather returns to the south, although it will stay changeable across Scotland and Northern Ireland with some wet weather at times.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick It Up a Gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's a race against time as 5 people, including a father and son who live in Britain, remain trapped almost 13,000 feet below the Atlantic Ocean.
It's 9 o'clock. Very good to see you on this Tuesday, the 20th of June. You're tuned into Breakfast on GB News. Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster.
Here's what's leading the news this morning.
We were notified by the operator of the submersible vessel that it was overdue, and it had 5 persons on board the submersible.
A mission to save a Titanic tourist sub continues this morning. One of the passengers on board includes British billionaire Hamish Harding, as well as father and son Shahzada Dawood and Solomon. It's thought the sub only has enough oxygen to last until Thursday.
A ban for Johnson. The former Prime Minister loses his parliamentary pass after MPs backed the report that he deliberately misled Parliament over lockdown parties. The vote was 354 to 7.
More than 6 million disabled people will receive a £150 cost of living payment from today. Work and Pension Secretary Mel Stride says it's intended to help the most vulnerable households.
It will go out between now and July the 4th. People don't need to apply. It will automatically go into their bank accounts where they're qualifying for certain benefits. So a number of measures particularly targeted at those lower income households who will be struggling the hardest.
And as a school student is allowed to identify as a cat, we will ask, are our classrooms just getting too woke?
I mean, it's beyond belief, really, isn't it, that we're even discussing it? Stop it, they'll clip that up and be playing it like George. I can't unsee that. Get in touch, have your say at gbnews@gbnews.com, or you can tweet us at GBNews.
Can you not just say to that child, can you not just say to that child, son, wise up? You know, you can't though, can't you?
No, of course you can't.
If you believe you're a cat, if you act like a cat, if you lick like a cat, you are a cat.
Saucer of milk. On to a really serious unfolding story this morning, and that search continuing for a submersible tourist vessel which was en route to the Titanic shipwreck in the Atlantic Ocean.
British billionaire, 58-year-old Hamish Harding on the left, chairman of private plane firm Action Aviation, is understood to be on board as well as a father and son duo, 48-year-old Shahzada Dawood, who is a board member of the Prince's Trust, and his 19-year-old son, Suleiman Dawood.
Yeah, both of whom we understand live in Surrey. Well, during a press conference, Rear Admiral John W. Morga of the US Coast Guard said they're doing everything they can to try and find this submersible.
We're working very closely at this point to make sure that we're doing everything that we can do to locate the submersible and rescue those on board. The location of the search is approximately 900 miles east of Cape Cod in a water depth of roughly 13,000 feet. It is a remote area. And it is a challenge to conduct a search in that remote area.
Well, the family of the missing Dawood adventurers that are on board that submersible have put out a statement that has been reported this morning. They say we're very grateful for the concern that's being shown by our colleagues and friends, and would like to request everyone to pray for their safety. Of course, incredibly traumatic to have a 48-year-old father and a 19-year-old son together. 3 Brits then caught up in all of this. Let's get the view of Tim Moulton. Joins us this morning, historian, TV presenter and expert in all things Titanic. I mean, it seems as though the Titanic curse has struck again.
It does. It's a terribly sad morning to wake up to this news. And I do hope that all those on the sub are found safely. I think the best hope would be if the sub is actually bobbing about on the surface and could be spotted by a helicopter. My concern, if the sub is on the seabed, is that there's not really many vessels that can go that deep. And it seems to me impossible to be able to do a sub-to-sub transfer of the people. So nothing short of a rescue will do here.
Shocking, really. And you know, your expertise and your knowledge of this part of the sea where the Titanic was found 73 years after it sank gives us an idea of you know, how this can be
inaccessible all of this is.
That's right. Bob Ballard found the wreck in 1985, and it was very much needle in a haystack job. It's in a very remote part of the North Atlantic. And of course, he was able to find it through what we call the debris field, because as Titanic sank, she broke in half, scattering a lot of metal, everything from boilers to knives and forks, all over a huge 1-mile area of the seabed. And it was really by flying down this debris field that Bob Ballard was able to locate the wreck in the first place.
Yeah, that's incredible. You know, you're so consumed with the history of the great ship, of course, and a lot of us are recoiling and thinking, oh gosh, it must be very claustrophobic on board that submarine. Why would you want to do that? Why would you actually want to pay an awful lot of money, maybe, you know, around £200,000 simply to be a tourist on this wreck? Is that something you can understand, though, Tim?
I can understand people wanting to get really close to it, and equally, you know the dangers, you know the risks, but you don't think it's going to be you. You always think it'll be safe, I'll be okay, and I sincerely hope that is the case in this very worrying time.
I don't know about you, when we heard the news breaking yesterday, it reminded me of the tragedy in the Thai caves with those school children caught there, or the miners in Chile. We're all totally captivated by this kind of time running out element. And we spoke to an oceanographer earlier who said that, look, we've lost contact now with this vessel. We don't know if they have electricity anymore. They could be in total darkness. They're incredibly deep in the sea. And in a confined space, it will be hot. There'll be no toilet facilities. I mean, it's the stuff of nightmares. Do you think that this will stop people from wanting to do these sorts of trips in the future?
I think it might bring in extra regulation. Certainly when you go on these subs, you have to sign a kind of waiver because obviously something could go wrong. But I sincerely hope in this case they'll be found alive. But unfortunately, they will get more and more cold. If the power goes, it will be cold and dark if they're on the seabed. And of course, these subs can only be opened from the outside. So even if they're on the surface, they can't exactly open a window and save themselves.
Right. And Tim, I just want to get an idea, maybe you would know, how regular trips like this are. Do they happen daily, weekly, monthly, biannually?
Well, Absolutely. This year, there's been very bad weather in this part of the North Atlantic. So I believe this is the first mission this year, although I could be wrong on that. But certainly the impression I'm trying to give you is that there have been probably about 100 missions to the Titanic since she was found in 1985. So it's not absolutely uncommon, but it is very much on the edge of technology. It's a bit like a moonshot. It's a bit like going into space when you're 2 miles down in the pitch black, freezing North Atlantic.
And do you think it raises questions perhaps about people who go on these high-risk, high-cost adventures, really, and perhaps, what that might mean when it goes wrong?
That's right. I think we will have to look at that again. There's one aspect is it causing damage to the wreck? Because these subs drop weights when they get to the bottom in order for them to then float up again by the air that's in the subs. As Eamonn and I have discussed before, of course, if the wreck was raised and brought back to Belfast, there wouldn't be such a danger.
Well, we just hope and pray, Tim, that everybody's okay, it all ends well. But listen, really, thank you very much indeed for your insight and being available to us this morning. We really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
And just a reminder, if you are just tuning in, that we are hearing this morning, one of those in the submersible is one of Pakistan's richest men, a board member on the Prince's Trust charity here in the UK, a resident in Surrey, on board along with his 19-year-old son, as well as a British citizen. So heavy British involvement in. And
they would have paid nearly £500,000 for their 2 tickets on that. But no reason why this should have gone wrong. What has gone wrong? And we hope it's redeemable, whatever it is. A 13-year-old who refused to accept that her classmate was a cat during a lesson was called despicable by her school teacher on this one.
It comes as the government launches fresh guidance for all students who wish to change their genders on school records, with parental consent now becoming mandatory.
Right, is government crackdown? Is this government crackdown justified? Or are we exaggerating the whole woke capture in schools? One of our favourite guests, maths teacher Bobby Segal, believes educators have to adapt to a wider climate. And another one of our very much favourite people who thinks differently on all of this is the broadcaster, the journalist, Mr. Martin Dobney. Martin, you say secondary schools have now become indoctrination centres, or is that too strong?
No, I mean, the definition of indoctrination is if you teach an ideology and you're unable to criticise it, and that's clearly what's happened in this instance. It seems absurd, doesn't it, that a girl can pretend to be a cat, but then for a teacher saying, no, you must listen to that, and if you don't, you're a bigot, and even worse, threatening to remove the children in question from the school and reporting them and making them do a written statement. So they're being punished for simply believing that biological sex is true, which it is. Now, I've got a lot of experience in this area. I used to teach in schools. I spoke to about 45,000 British teenagers along the lines of porn safeguarding. And about 8 years ago, I saw the trans movement infiltrate British schools. At first, it was great. It was teaching tolerance, acceptance, and the freedom to be whoever we want to be. What a wonderful thing. But then it became politicised. It was infiltrated by groups like Stonewall, mermaids, and they were teaching dangerous things in secret, such as binding of breasts, routes to hormone therapy, and all the way secrecy from parents. That's grooming. Now, the new legislation from the government, I think, is long, long overdue. However, I fear it's too little too late. Every British parent has a right, I think, to demand from their school what their kids are being taught about this, and sex education and critical race theory, because we have crossed the Rubicon from education. We're now moving into the realms of indoctrination.
Bobby, do you accept that? Do you think that schools have stopped focusing on educating children and it's becoming politicised, and perhaps it could even be deterring some people from working in schools?
So again, as a part-time school teacher, I would still say schools, the primary aim and main objective is to make sure we get children educated so they can get their year 6 SATs, GCSEs, A-levels. But we do live in a new climate environment where we need to be sort of more sensitive to the needs of young people. And I would say it's about bringing balance to this debate. Obviously, that cat example is an extreme one. And I think, the teacher there probably needs having a word to. But I think if we can have a system where young people are educated, again, in the maths and the science and English, but at the same time demonstrate being empathetic, having compassion and social justice. I think that's we're developing better young people. And of course, we get extremes on either side, but I think it's trying to make sure we develop the full rounded person that's sympathetic to others. So I always tell, again, when people ask me, Bobby, are you a woke person? I said, I don't like these terms being attached to me, but if you are saying that, am I, Mr. Siegel, a compassionate teacher? Yes. If someone has an issue, listen to them, trying to understand what it is and get to the bottom of it rather than dismissing them immediately.
But Bobby, by being a compassionate teacher and accepting the argument that somebody can identify as something that they aren't born as, is it not just an extension of that argument if they decide they then want to identify as a cat? I mean, it's the same argument, isn't it?
Of course, and I think sometimes you do have to draw lines. If one of my students said to me, Mr. Siegel, in a maths lesson, I think I'm a cat, I'd probably maybe first find out, is it serious? Students sometimes do make jokes. But if they're serious, then obviously there's a deep underlying, probably mental issue beneath that. So try and get to the bottom of it. I think having conversations is not a bad thing.
Martin?
Yeah, look, I totally agree with that. In fact, I had this conversation with my children this morning. We've got a cat. They love cats. And I said to them, here's a video of a girl who thinks she's a cat. And they started laughing. I said, well, why is that funny? He said, well, obviously, they can't be a cat. I said, OK, so what about if a white person identifies as black? And they go, well, I'm not sure. Well, what about if a man identifies as a woman? So actually, this conversation is quite useful about the cat thing, because if people can decide they can be whatever they want to be, then where do we draw the lines? Clearly, this person isn't a cat. And so by the same logic and reckoning, you can't change your race or your sex, surely.
I'm just stretching my imagination here into thinking, why were they even in this realm? Why were they debating this in the first place? Why is this necessary? And as Bobby was saying, if he was teaching the class and someone says to him, sir, I'm a cat, no, my answer would be something like, yes, and I'm your maths teacher, and here's extra homework for you, so shut up and get on with it. But you can't do things like that now, Martin, can you?
Yeah, I think that's the issue here, Eamonn. So while on the one hand, this might seem like an absurd story, actually, I think it's much more common than we think. Now, let's give credit to the children in this video. If you listen to this video, it's the children that are applying logic. It's the children that are applying critical thinking. It's the children that are taking down bad ideas through rigorous cross-examination. But the teacher is standing by this nonsense steadfastly. This video actually, on the one hand, while ridiculous, Eamonn and Isabel and Bobby, it gives me real hope that the children are switched on to this and the kids are all right.
Bobby, I just want to ask if you feel that part of your role in all of this is to safeguard young people, because whatever it might be, whether it's mental illness when they think they're identifying as a cat, or dealing with hormones and stuff we all went through and we don't really know who we are or what we're about quite yet. Part of your job is to allow them to grow up free from all of these kind of influences so that they can make these kinds of life-changing decisions later on. It's not really the right place, is it, when these kids are going through so much? Do you feel that responsibility?
Yeah, again, as a teacher, in fact, probably one of the most important things that all teachers have to be trained through is safeguarding, looking out for things like physical, mental, sexual, emotional abuse, all those things. So safeguarding is probably the number one thing that all teachers are trained to do. But of course, it's a tough balance, because our young people, when they leave school at, 3:30, 4 o'clock, whatever it is, they enter the world, the real world. They have social media, they've got TikTok, etc. So they're being influenced by ideas. So as an educator, if they're seeing and talking about these things outside the school gates, I would actually like to have that conversation, at least in school. That way I can have an informed discussion, rather than them being sort of influenced in a positive or negative way purely outside the school gates. So I think rather have that conversation in school than just saying, actually, we'll leave it to outside the school gates.
Well, I know we've got to let you get inside the school gates, Bobby, because I know you're a full-time teacher as well. And thank you for your time, sir, today. We appreciate it. And Martin, thank you very much indeed for enlightening us in your views on all of this. We've got to leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Let's go to The Point, find out what Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner will have
Thanks,
for us.
Vivi. Great, thank you.
Good morning to you both. What have you got coming up?
Morning, mate. That was a great
Morning.
discussion, by the way. That was on Martin Daubney's side, obviously.
Honestly, I just want to talk to the parents of the children who think they identify as a cat, to ask them what they think they're doing with those children. It's fascinating.
And one of them identify now as the moon, another one as a dinosaur. But we are obviously talking about what's happening with the Titanic exploration. We're talking to an author who was invited to go on a very same trip.
Yeah, that's right, and find out what the preparation was like for the trip. She didn't actually get on it in the end. Julie Cook is her name. She's a journalist, but we're going to be talking to her at the top of the show to find out what that experience would have been like.
And what is the lure of the Titanic that encourages people to spend nearly £1 million to go 2.5 miles down deep into the ocean.
Yeah, so
Extraordinary.
we'll have the latest on that. We've got Liam Halligan in the studio as well to talk about inflation and interest rates, which are really worrying a lot of people in terms of our mortgage responsibilities at the moment.
And we've got the accuser from Nottingham in court today. And also we're reflecting on Boris Johnson, that vote last night. Only 7 Tory MPs voted to support Boris, and we're going to be talking to one of them.
Good. And we hope we'll have Andrew's microphone fixed by then as well, or he'll have to do a lot of shouting. We're going to the races. Royal Ascot with Ellie Costello right after this.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's that very special time of the year, isn't it?
Big flat season. Royal Ascot opens its gates today, and racegoers will be hoping the King and Queen will join them for the sporting event, which they will, I'm sure, going down the race course, and some of the best horses and jockeys in the world will be there.
Yes, and our very own Ellie Costello, donning a spectacular hat, joins us now from Ascot. Wow, look at that. Getting into the spirit of things there, Ellie. What's in store for us today?
Hello, good morning to you both. Yes, I thought I'd go really subtle with my look today. Of course, this is where royals, racing and fashion all come together for 5 spectacular days. And this is where it's all going to kick off when doors open at 10:30. We've just seen security sweep through here at the front. Of course, security is going to be a big issue today with suspected protests from Animal Rising. There's a bar over there that's being fully stocked. And if I spin you around here, you can see all the stewards and stewardesses who are just lining up here, getting ready for their training. See if they give us a wave. I've got one wave there, lovely. They're obviously very, very focused on their job that's to hand. But it is a sad event a little bit today, Eamonn and Izzy, because it is the first Royal Ascot without Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, and we know how much she loved her horse racing. And even just now, we've come through into the racecourse, and you can just see pictures and posters of her everywhere. So, of course, her legacy is going to continue. Everybody is going to be hoping that the King and Queen will be here today. There's going to be a royal procession along this very racecourse at about 2 p.m. Obviously hoping that the King and Queen are going to be there, perhaps the Princess and the Prince of Wales as well. But they have got 5 days to be here at Royal Ascot, and hopefully we'll catch a glimpse of them today. One of the favourites this afternoon is Frankie Dettori's horse. He is retiring at 52 years old, and that horse was actually owned by Queen Elizabeth II, now owned by King Charles and Queen Camilla. So wouldn't that just be so fitting if Dettori wins on that royal horse that now belongs to the King and Queen, but did belong to Queen Elizabeth II? That would just be a beautiful moment later on this afternoon.
Yeah, that would be such a nice sort of squaring of the circle, wouldn't it? Or circle of whatever the phrase I'm trying to come out with. But you're right, it's a huge loss to the racing world, the late Her Majesty the Queen. And, you know, King Charles will do his bit, won't he? He's trying, but he just doesn't have that same affinity with the racehorses.
Queen Camilla knows her horse flesh.
She knows her GGs.
Yeah, yeah.
Ellie, how big is this risk then of protests today? There are lots of concerns about that.
Yes, there has been lots of concern. Of course, we saw it at the Grand National, didn't we? We saw it at the Derby. There were almost over 100 arrests at the Grand National. Animal Rising haven't said they're not going to protest today. They did offer it to Royal Ascot that if Royal Ascot hosted a debate about animal welfare, then they wouldn't protest here today. But Ascot has said they're not going to be held to ransom by Animal Rising. They won't be hosting that debate. Instead, they've offered them a very small area for them to protest in. Whether they stick to that area or whether they actually head onto the racecourse, we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, and what will happen to all those blue bottles round Ellie's head? I hope they
swap those flies
away, get rid of those. Thank you very much, Ellie. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
And that's it from us this morning. We will be here tomorrow morning. We are heading off to the races ourselves. We've got to be there bright and early. But Ellie will be indoors with Stephen from 6 a.m.
But up next, it's Bev and Andrew with To The Point. Have a fabulous day.
Good morning.
Morning
Thanks for joining us. We got a packed show this morning. We're going to be watching that situation, obviously, with the Titanic tourist crew to see if there's any good news there.
Yeah, 19-year-old boy on that. How harrowing. And also, interest rates, big story, cabinet meeting today. What are they going to do about it? Not very much, I suspect.
And what Boris said last night about the vote.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely
Right.
stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be